Heaven. This place is everyone's dream. To reach this dream, many people have given up their lives. The boundless sky leading to paradise, consisting of 9 levels of clouds, caught the hero's eye. The hero knew that the first to reach the top would rule the world from the high heavens. The young man's confidence knew no bounds. He only asked for a little time to become the master of the world. Brochures describing the event and the local heroes were distributed throughout the city. A gang of bandits rejoiced, imagining that their turn had come in such a wonderful city. The robber snatched the brochure and tore it up, saying that there was nothing special about it. According to the leader, if it weren't for them, the village would come to an end. The leader laughed loudly, while the main character walked by with a smirk on his face. In a split second, the young man lunged at the bandits, deftly picking the pockets of the group. One of the bandits immediately noticed the loss of his personal belongings and looked around. The main character thanked the contestants, saying that he would put the money to good use. These bags contained all the robbers' money, so they immediately rushed after the young thief. The main character's agility was absurd. He ran through all the citizens, pushing everyone in his path. Even despite all the obstacles, the robbers managed to catch up with the main character, surprising him. Soon, the hand caught up with the main character, leaving him no choice but to defend himself. The young man kicked with a roundhouse kick, and the bandit was unable to counter and took the blow. The green-haired man was knocked out, and his ally immediately rushed into battle for revenge. The main character took a handful of sand from his pocket and threw it straight into the enemy's eyes. Noticing the savagery of the robbers, the young man added that he had made a good catch with them. But he miscalculated badly, because he suddenly realized that the third remaining bandit was behind him. The guy grabbed the thief by the collar and said that he had only 2 options. The first option was death, and the second was to return the stolen goods, but he would be beaten half to death. The thief refused to give back what he had stolen and gave the bandit the middle finger as a sign of refusal. The main character made his choice, angering the guy even more. The leader of the group pinned him to the ground. After that, the robber began to brutally beat the thief, who could not fight back. While the beating continued, the rest of the gang gathered their strength and stood up. When the leader wanted to take his money, the thief waved his hand and hid the bags behind his back. The main character said that he could not and would not give the robbers their money back. The red-haired guy said that anyone who saw the young man would think he had stolen the money. The group continued to beat the thief. Citizens nearby noticed the boy and realized that he was the thief Zik. The people of this city had already heard about Zik. This boy stole something every day and got away with it. The young, skinny guy attracted everyone's attention when he shouted at the robbers to stop. The leader asked the stranger who he was, assuming that he was a defender of the local people. The guy was a respected figure, making the citizens wonder what had brought Mr. Fried here. The gentleman asked the robbers to accept his apology, because his friend had been rude. Fried agreed to pay full compensation. The leader, without thinking twice, decided to withdraw his men, because Fried insisted on his point. A little later, the guys went off on their own. Fried wanted to know if Zik was okay after that. Zik replied that he couldn't be okay in such a situation, but added that he would have managed on his own. Even though he was almost killed, money is like a small seed for which one can give their life. According to Fried, the thief had always gone to extremes for money, both then and now. When they first met, Zeke stole bread from a young man and almost ended up in prison for 18 years. Zeke may have been a thief, but he was a very brave thief. Even when he made mistakes, he was not like the others. Even living the life of a thief, Zeke retained hope. And that is why his eyes shine. The guys miraculously became friends. Zik noticed that Mr. Fried himself was involved in theft. Fried said that no one could escape this fate. Not even the robbers, nor those who watched from the sidelines. Even Mr. Fried was an outcast, because everyone in this world tries to soar to the heavens. Zeke said he didn't want to hear anymore, and Fried became agitated and asked him where he was going. The main character stood at the edge of the precipice, looked up, and said that he was going to heaven. Looking at his city, Fried wondered how long they had been hostages to such a fate. After all, now everything around them was just deep, dead land where everyone was trying to survive. 500 years had passed since everything collapsed, and the sky was divided into 9 levels. A significant part of the world had changed dramatically, and people suffered from poverty and hunger. The only hope that would allow these people to live better was to climb into the heavens. Only by tasting the fruits of life can everything change. Higher and higher, humanity is doomed to this. But Fried considered such an undertaking a luxury because the situation is still difficult. People who are unable to climb to heaven are deprived of a future, left to rot in this place. The gentleman knew this because for Zika, this topic was closest to the life of a young thief. A little later, a group of people gathered in the city center. The man greeted all the contestants. He announced that the event they had all gathered for was about to begin. Zik was also in the crowd, and he shouted that he wanted to participate too. This was not the first time for him. People nearby joked that the thief had been participating in this for many years, but nothing had come of it. The man approached Zik and said that anyone could participate in the event, but the only condition for participation was a fee that the man demanded for admission. Zik had to give up the stolen money, and the man said that now no one could object to the thief's participation. Zico didn't want to give up his seeds, but he had to achieve his goal at any cost. A long time ago, bandits attacked Ziku's place of residence, robbing everyone and killing regardless. Little Zik was scared and crying, but suddenly his father handed him a golden seed. His father was also scared, but he had no choice. He told his son to run while the bandit swung his sword to kill the man. The child had to run, screaming and crying, while his father was mercilessly killed behind him. This world has gone mad. Zik promised himself that he would climb to the very heavens. A group of men began to blow horns, and the organizer announced that after a long wait, the main festival of the heavens was beginning. The first task for the contestants was to search for the soul bird in the dense forest. To ascend to the heavens, this was the first task. This time, Zik was more confident in his success. The birds could talk, noticing that humans were crawling bugs that they were tired of. Zik ran through the forest with a net, fiercely swinging at every bird in sight with a glimmer of hope. But every time the boy tried to catch a bird, it flew away from him hopelessly. Zik's task was to catch just one bird, so he continued to fight for his destiny. After 3 hours of unsuccessful attempts, the main character was saddened by his failure. The 3 thugs who had beaten Zik earlier found the thief. They had already found their own birds and came to mock the guy. Zik recognized these guys but didn't want to deal with them, saying that he was busy and had things to do. But as soon as he started to walk away, one of the men struck him, breaking the main character's net. Surprised, Zik jumped back, and the leader noticed that the guy had been very lucky since the beginning of the day. But this time, no one could stand up for Zik in his fight against the robbers and their newly acquired birds. Preparing for battle, the robbers' birds began to glow with power, and joy was visible on their faces. The bullies' hands were filled with weapons provided by the magical birds for the upcoming battle. Using the blades to attack, the robbers' strength increased, and Zika had trouble dodging. The next axe attack was successful, but the thief managed to put his arm out to compensate for the damage from the blow. Even despite his severe injury, Zeke was confident that he could defeat the bullies standing before him. But the men's confidence knew no bounds, and as soon as Zeke tried to attack, he missed. Using the power of birds, the men were able to soar into the sky, creating crystal wings for themselves. Zeke was perplexed when his enemies moved forward to launch another attack. The main character saw the cowardice of his opponents, but he also understood the danger he was in and began to run away. After a long run, Zeke found himself in an even worse position, for there was a wall in front of him. Before he could react, the main character was immediately struck in the body with a magical weapon. The blow severely wounded Zik, while the robbers mocked him for being the only one without a bird. The man said that a bug like Zik was destined to crawl on the ground for the rest of his life. The main character told him to shut up, because he believed that he would definitely rise to the heavens. But this made the robbers laugh, because Zeke only dreamed of the heavens, but was too weak for that. For someone like Zeke to be so lucky, a miracle would have to happen. But the robber did not think this was possible. The wounded boy said that climbing to heaven was not his ultimate goal. The main character revealed that he was going to soar above the 9th level to paradise itself. But such a goal made the bandits laugh even harder, as it was so unrealistic. Over the past 500 years, not a single soul had been able to ascend to heaven. According to legend, at such a high point, there was a source of life where the tree of the world grew. The bandit leader believed that Zika's ultimate goal was to become a god. But his answer was different from what the leader had imagined, for he refused. Raising a flaming axe above his head, the bandit continued to mock this goal. Zik was unable to dodge, so he had to take the full blow of the magical weapon upon himself. After such a blow, the young man's body was left with a deep wound that slowly led him to his death. But the bandits rejoiced at his death, for they had managed to test their weapons on Zik before he died. The main character could not accept his death, for he had not yet done anything to achieve his goal. Just before his death, Zik began to cry, for he too wanted to catch the bird and reach the heavens. Looking up, he noticed a small egg on the edge of the cliff, swaying back and forth. Due to the sudden movement, the egg fell off the cliff and quickly rolled down to the battlefield. The shell immediately broke, and a penguin-like bird burst out of the small egg. The leader of the robbers thought this bird was strange, and decided not to interact with it in any way. The mysterious creature noticed the dying Zika and approached him. but the bird stumbled on the way. Holding its paw, the animal whimpered in pain while the bandits laughed. The leader said that the bird was as worthless as Zik, assuming that it had come to help the thief. Summoning his last ounce of strength, the protagonist reached out his hand and begged the bird to help him. But the animal became angry, waving Zik's hand away. The bird declared that he did not dare touch him with his dirty hands. Despite its anger, the bird immediately disliked the robbers who were mocking Zik. For the sole reason of dislike for his enemies, the animal agreed to help Zika. In a split second, a huge aura appeared above the little bird, covering Zika. When the aura dissipated a little, the main character's body was in the air, emitting dark streaks. The robbers, without thinking twice, rushed into battle, deciding that it was time to finish off the thief. Finally, the bird merged with Zika, saying that even if there were 1,000 of them, they would not be able to defeat him. His strength was enough for all of them against this body. Suddenly, a dragon appeared before the band of robbers. The men finally understood the danger. Before them was a real dragon. Zik's body was under control, and using his hand, the bird applied the dragon's claw skill. Noticing the impending attack, the leader ordered his allies to flee from Zik. Even though they tried to run away, the dragon's claw was much faster, catching up with the bandits. The leader realized that there was no point in running away anymore. Taking his axe, he attacked the claw, but his attack was completely useless. As if hitting a wall, the robbers were buried in the shadows. When the dragon's claw dispersed, the stricken bandits found themselves powerless. Zeke began to come to, not yet realizing it, but the wounds on his body had healed. The surprised boy noticed a bird that was showing off its skills to Zeke at that moment. Zeke's expression softened, and his hands began to shake. This was what he had always dreamed of. The main character rushed to hug the bird, rejoicing that he had finally gotten himself a bird. Zeke's joy knew no bounds, for his dream had come true, and he would now be able to soar into the heavens. Meanwhile, Fried continued to search for a bird, but he was distracted by a bright light and a voice calling for his master. When Fried approached the source of the light, he saw a huge bird before his eyes. The great beast turned to the master and said that he could become the master of the skies. Zeke wanted to know the bird's name, but the animal did not know its name, for it had only recently been born. The main character decided to call his pet Grumpy because of how often it complained. Although Grumpy did not like this title, the joyful Zeke drowned out his words. The penguin brushed off the thief's hands, jumped to the ground, and declared that he would not listen to him. Moreover, the main character did not even realize who the bird really was. The pet decided to reveal that he was the king of the skies. Zik began to laugh, but the penguin thought that he was shrinking from the defeat of the king's greatness. The thief still didn't believe it, but even so, he turned to the penguin, the king of the skies, for help. Zik wanted to fly high into the sky, and the help of the king of the skies would definitely come in handy. The penguin pointed to the ground and ordered the thief to bow down at his feet 3 times, and then he would consider his request. A short time later, the pet received a couple of blows and agreed to obey the thief. The king of the skies wanted to know where they were going, and a joyful Zeke replied that they were heading to the very top, to the cliff. Once he reached the very top of the cliff, Zik would be able to soar into the sky, even though the penguin wasn't interested in that. If he didn't do it now, he would have to wait another whole year. But this time, luck was on his side. But as soon as he spoke of success, a huge monster appeared behind Zik, clearly targeting them. Zik turned to his pet, asking him to transform, as he had done last time, in order to defeat the enemy. But the penguin couldn't use his power when he was hungry, so without food, Zik would be weak. The monster immediately attacked, and the main character tried to dodge, but he couldn't defeat the monster alone. Just as hope began to fade, dozens of flaming swords appeared above the beast's head. With each passing second, the number of blades increased, and they pierced the enemy completely. When the monster fell, a guy was visible behind its body. It was Mr. Freed who controlled this power. The boys greeted each other joyfully, but Freed was even happier when he saw that his friend had a companion. The guy knew that Zik had a lot of questions, so he added that, in his words, no one could escape this fate. Fried became part of the absolute team. To honor the memory of his ancestors, he followed in their footsteps. While the guy was talking about fate, the penguin was mocking him a little and barbecuing the monster's meat. When it came to eating, the voracious companion began running all over the monster's body, eating pieces off it. The penguin calmly continued his meal when suddenly a bright bird flew into him. The bird asked the penguin why he was disgracing them. Phoenix was ashamed that they belonged to the same race. Fried called his bird to his hand and, turning to it, told Ruin that this was not acceptable. Although his bird was a little ill-mannered, Fried was sure that Ruin was a good guy. Zik looked at Ruin, which made the bird ask him why he was staring so hard that his eyes were about to pop out. The main character asked the bird why he was so bold. Ruin replied that he would not allow some wingless human to look down on him. Ruin declared that birds were more majestic than humans. The penguin immediately agreed. For the phoenix, humans are helpless creatures who cannot fly into the sky without them. Since time immemorial, they have been creatures with special abilities and the right to fly. So following their instincts, they have always strived to soar high into the heavens. Now the heavens are divided into 9 levels, and they could not rise higher without cooperating with humans. However, it is birds that can give them wings and help them fly into the heavens. Birds of the soul are the masters of this world. Ruin was enraged that a creature of the same race as him had forgotten its past and its purpose in life. Zeke continued to argue with Ruin, while Fried tried to calm his bird, when suddenly clouds began to gather. The guys realized that it was time to hurry, because they were so close to the place where the gates would open. Climbing up to the cliff, they saw dozens of people who had already climbed up and were waiting for the start. The organizer was standing right under the gate, saying that they had been waiting for the contestants for too long. Very soon, the final heavenly ceremony would begin, before people could soar upward. The gates opened. Fried immediately looked up and noticed a passageway leading through 9 levels. The organizer pointed out that this was true, and that the heavenly gate only opened once a year. Time was running out, as the passage created by atmospheric pressure could close quickly. Everyone who had a soul bird could help achieve all the dreams and hopes that were right in front of them. Only those who had the courage to jump off the cliff before takeoff would be able to achieve their dreams. One of the contestants said that if this scared anyone, they would surely lose. This guy was the first to have the courage to jump and fly up with the help of his soul bird. But he couldn't make it through the gate, because a strong gust of wind overpowered his bird's wings. The fall of one of the contestants overshadowed the happy atmosphere, as confidence plummeted. Fried decided to go second, commanding Ruin, and large golden wings appeared behind him. In a split second, the young gentleman soared into the sky with a single gust. When Fried took off, the other contestants did not want to be left behind, as the gate could close soon. Zik did not want to be last, but when he wanted to call his pet, it suddenly disappeared. So the main character would not be able to ascend into the sky, so he had to bring his bird back. After a short walk in the forest, he found his pet, who was eagerly eating meat. Zik picked up the penguin and said that because of its little snack, they might be late to the gate. The grumpy man tied the carcass with a rope and carried it with him, saying that he would take it with him for later. An enraged Zik kicked the meat with his foot, pulling the penguin back so he couldn't take the meat. But the corpse accidentally hit a huge monster on the head, which made it angry at Zik. Throwing away the piece of meat, the monster immediately got up to take revenge on the man who had interrupted his sleep. Zik immediately started running, and the grumpy man quickly overtook him while the huge monster chased after them. Since they had no choice but to run, Zik had to jump off a cliff. The main character asked the penguin to spread its wings, but it said it hadn't eaten enough. The monster was so focused on its prey that it fell off the cliff after them. They had 2 options: be eaten by the monster or fall and crash. Zik understood that his life would end like this, and he couldn't do anything about it. Gritting his teeth, Zik regained his confidence that he would soar into the sky no matter what it took. Ordering the penguin to unleash its power, the thief's confidence took hold, releasing the bird's might. A pillar of dark energy enveloped everything around, even surprising the monster that had previously wanted to kill Zik. The main character was able to take flight, piercing the huge monster with a burst of power and leaving a hole in its body. Thanks to his confidence, with every passing second, Zik was getting closer and closer to the gates. The gates began to close, and all the contestants rushed towards them to get to heaven. But they didn't make it in time. Even though Zik had no intention of stopping, he continued to rush upward. The guy's speed surprised all the contestants. In an instant, he was able to fly past them, finding himself almost at the gates. The contestants thought he wouldn't be able to break through the gates and would simply sign his own death warrant. Zik crashed into the passageway and continued to try, regardless of anything else. His goal was above all else. The penguin turned to him and asked him to give up, because he could try his luck again next year. The main character declared that there would be no next year. If not now, then the entire journey would be meaningless. Inside the gate, Fried noticed a dark light coming from the closed entrance. Mr. Fried was the only person who believed in his friend's success. Giving all his hope and confidence, Zik managed to break through the closed gate. Calling Fried to follow him, Ziku rushed upward, finally reaching the long-awaited heavens. The contestants behind them could not understand how 2 people could move so quickly through the heavens. Breaking through another layer of clouds, Fried and Zik found themselves on the first level of heaven. The city of the fallen, Icarus. The city's inhabitants turned around when they noticed the new contestants who had arrived in the city of the fallen. The pioneers of heaven were shocked. They had no idea that there was actually a whole city in heaven. The citizens praised the new celestials. Fried was happy about this, but Zik was extremely embarrassed. But in an instant, Zik began to fly away without realizing it, moving further and further away from his friend. The guy started flying at great speed in some direction, without even knowing why. The reason turned out to be his pet, who smelled delicious food and immediately rushed towards it against Zik's will. While the main character begged the bird to stop, a girl with a megaphone noticed them. She said that he was heading into a restricted area. The contestant had to stop immediately. Noticing that Zik was not going to stop, Chief of Staff Malin became angry. To deal with the contestant, the girl turned to her bird Tiffany for help. Behind her, wings spread, and in her hands appeared a bow that used the power of the wind. A powerful gust of wind easily struck Zik and his pet, who were unaware of the danger. The penguin lost his balance and caused the guy to fall. Malin noticed that she had enough to worry about without him. Strict restrictions were in place here in accordance with the judge's order. All newcomers were prohibited from flying without permission. Simply put, Zik violated Article 3, Section 8, as well as Article 5, Section 6, by entering a restricted area. As punishment, the guy would be taken into custody for violating flight discipline, and Zik was quickly tied up. Fried was surprised that his friend always found himself in adventures that made his situation worse. Malin ordered the rest of the arrivals to descend if they did not want to be arrested. Soon, Zika was taken to the first-level security office, where he tried to explain his situation in detail. The main character tried to reveal the truth, but Malin did not listen to him, only asking him to sign an agreement. Since this was his first offense, the guy would get away with just a fine for crossing into a restricted area. Zik would have to pay 500 seeds for the violation, which was too much for him. Behind Ziku was another contestant watching the guy beg for forgiveness for his fine. The big guy sat down next to him and told Ziku to stop asking for anything, because they weren't going to listen to his nonsense. This contestant's armor and weapons looked formidable. He was no ordinary guy, but it was clear that he was not a long-time settler. Malin pressured Zika, forcing him to sign the agreement. The main character decided to do it, but he would have to steal from someone again. The bully couldn't take it anymore. He snapped and threw off the guards around him. While Zik was signing the agreement, a fight broke out behind him between the guards and the contestant. The impact of the battle threw the main character to the ground, and he accidentally stabbed a guard in the leg with a pen. This was considered an attack, and in a split second, the guards turned on the two contestants. The guards immediately began their attack. Zik did not expect this and barely dodged the spear. The main character became angry, waved his hand, and summoned his pet's aura, creating gloves. Dodging another spear strike, Zik was about to counterattack the attacker. Zik immediately delivered a vicious blow that incapacitated the enraged security guard. There were many enemies, so the contestants had to hold their ground and fight off many. No matter how hard the guards tried, thanks to his new powers, Zik began to fight back. Even when the guards gathered their strength and attacked as a group, a small burst of power defeated them all. The main character figured out some of his new powers and, striking the ground, stunned all the guards nearby. Zika's power exceeded that of ordinary guards, and now they were afraid to attack him. Suddenly, they noticed a green force appearing in the sky, which frightened the guards even more. Everyone was frightened, and the force began to gather. Zik did not understand what it was, but as it turned out, they had angered the judge. A huge wooden hand appeared from the heavens, heading towards the intruders at the security office. Zik managed to dodge the hand of justice, but the second contestant was less fortunate. When the hand disappeared, it left a mark on the ground, and many guards were struck down along with the contestant. The remaining guards decided to gather together to capture the weakened contestant. Fried wandered around the city, but he was agitated because he couldn't find Zik for a long time. In the very center of the city, the contestants were walking down the road in handcuffs, accompanied by guards. According to the judge's ruling, treason is a criminal offense. Malin led Zika and the contestant to a tree that resembled the judge's hand, and asked them to wait. Malin contacted the judge, telling him that the criminals had been detained and the gates had opened. The wooden gates opened onto a large clearing, which was clean and beautiful, with bright sunshine illuminating the fields. Zik was amazed by the beauty of this place, his interest reaching its peak. Malin proudly announced that this was the judge's own garden. Right in the middle of the clearing was a red sofa, and on it lay an unremarkable man. Zik noticed this stranger and called him a homeless person, which enraged Malin. The girl angrily pointed out Zek's rudeness, because he didn't even know who was in front of him. This stranger was the ruler of the first level, and the city of Icarus, a great judge. Although he was a respected man, Mr. Phesis was sleeping peacefully on his sofa. The main character was amazed to learn that Mr. Thesis was a judge, while the contestant mocked him. After uttering a phrase about the gentleman, the guards pointed their spears at the young man's throat and told him not to dare to attack the will of the great judge again. These cries woke Thesis, who complained to Malin that he had just gone to sleep. The girl got down on one knee and immediately began to apologize to the judge. Yawning, Thesis asked Malin if they had any problems, since they had ended up in his garden. Malin revealed that the big guy was a hardened criminal who was always causing trouble, and the little guy was another contestant who had just arrived from the lower lands. A very bad man, he nearly crippled all the soldiers. They both fell under the second article of the fourth clause, treason and damage to Icarus. Thesis agreed that they should be punished, but asked Malin to deal with it herself. Zik didn't understand anything while Malin tearfully complained about Thesis's constant inappropriate behavior. The main character finally realized that the technique of the great judge's hand was not as outstanding as he thought, because only its size was frightening. Zik told Malin that they were very busy, so they could just go their separate ways and leave everything as it was. The big guy couldn't stand it. He broke his chains and was about to kill Thesis. When the contestant was about to strike the judge, Thesis was disappointed that he couldn't get away from him. Releasing the roots from his finger, Thesis easily pierced the contestant's body through and through. The contestant's body flew into the air, and the roots began to spread, creating a flash of nature. Right in front of Zeke, another criminal died, which made the guy think about his previous words. Thesis got up and noticed that the contestant was indeed a bully, and that Zik would be working for them for 10 years. Malin grabbed the chain and said that the boy's punishment had been announced, and now he could follow her. Screaming, Zeke declared that he did not want to stay here for the next 10 years. Malin kicked him to the ground and asked if the main character was tired of living. The guy said they might as well kill him, because it would be better than rotting away for 10 years in this town. They knew nothing at all. No one cared about Zek's plans. But he needed to get to paradise. Malin grabbed the nearest spear and said that for violating Article 1, Section 1, insulting a great judge, Zik faced the death penalty. Thesis asked the lady to stop, because now he liked the main character. Malin led Zik to the security post at the Icarus checkpoint, where they were met by Fried. The guy was insanely happy that his friend had finally been released. Fried was very worried, thinking that his friend would perish this time. Malin said that Zika was just lucky, because by the mercy of the judge, his punishment had been changed to a trial. To advance to the next level, one must obtain the judge's permission. They would not be able to advance to the next level and pass the next trial without the judge's permission. The higher a person wants to go, the more energy they need. Those who pass the trial go to the next layer of the land, receiving a mark. Zeke had only just arrived at the first level, and Thesis had already chosen him. Therefore, he should be grateful for such generosity. Malin handed him a scroll containing information about the trial. The guys came to the eastern part of Icarus, the plains of Junius. They came to this place because the scroll indicated it. Zik considered the trial easy, because all he had to do was bring 2 fruits to Thesis. Fried said that such a test was more like an errand, which Zik did not understand at all. Suddenly a penguin appeared and said that in that case, Zik had to find him some food. Zik demanded information from his pet about where he had disappeared to at the most crucial moment. Even Ruin kept telling him that his poor nature was evident in his speech. Zik was angry that the birds were being rude to him. While Zik was fighting the birds, Fried noticed a fruit tree nearby and called the others over. On the way to the fruit trees, there were a couple of animals, which looked like ordinary rabbits. The rabbits seemed strange to Fried, but Zik thought they were just ordinary animals. But as soon as they got closer, the rabbits became gigantic. Their special feature was their mastery of martial arts. Zik activated his pet's power, creating a glove. The penguin did not object, as he wanted rabbit meat. Frito summoned Ruin and ordered him to quickly deal with the enemies so as not to disgrace his honor. Zik was the first to attack the giant rabbit, but thanks to the agility of his wings, he dodged the attack. And with a lunge, the main character counterattacked the beast, killing it with a single blow. 2 rabbits attacked Zika, crossing their arms and using their fists to defend themselves from the incoming blows. After withstanding a series of blows, the main character unleashed his power and easily defeated the 2 rabbits. Fried grabbed his sword and swung it, killing a group of giant rabbits. While Zik continued to beat the monsters, Fried noticed that one of them had crept up behind him. The rabbit attacked quickly, but thanks to his friend, the main character managed to block the blow. Although the giant was strong, Zik was able to overpower it by unleashing even more power. Zeke thanked Fried for his help. The guy replied that if it weren't for their numbers, they would have won long ago. But the boys' confidence did not waver, and they continued to beat the giant rabbits one after another. Soon, they finally defeated the herd of giant monsters, successfully completing the test. The guys walked through the city. Zeke juggled fruit, noting that the task was very easy. All that remained was to take the fruit to the storage room, but the fight had exhausted the bird, and Zeke even promised to feed it. But as they walked to the storage room, they encountered a whole line of other contestants. The man noticed Zeke and Frida and immediately realized that they were here for the first time. So he decided to enlighten them. In fact, he had been given the same task as everyone else in line. Judging by how easy the test was, the judge clearly loved these fruits. But his main goal was to annoy the contestants. Words cannot describe how lazy Physis is, so he decided to simply make the contestants work for no reason. However, once a month, Physis gave out one pass, but it was only for one person. That's why there are many guys who can't move up for years. Moving to the next level is like winning the lottery. Zico realized this, which is why the bully wanted to kill Physis and couldn't control himself. The main character didn't want to give up because of this, but the drunkard said that luck was only on their side. When Zeke arrived in these lands, he immediately sensed that this was a completely different world, unlike the lower level. Fried read about it in a history book he found at home. Icarus is just the first level where the contestants end up. It is a densely populated and economically developed country. Contestants need equipment to advance to the next level, which is sold by the locals. Thanks to this, the contestants will be able to rise higher, or rather, they will gain hope. This is a place of despair. Due to the large number of applicants, many have failed. The fallen, wishing to soar toward the sun. For this reason, this city was called Icarus. Standing by the white tree, Fried said that they could only hope for luck. All the contestants waited joyfully while the judge stood in the center of the arena, preparing for something. Yawning, Physis hoped to get it over with as quickly as possible and continue sleeping. The man unleashed his power on a small branch, creating a green pillar of power reaching up to the heavens. Roots began to form around it, creating a stronger support upwards. The roots divided into 5 branches, which pierced the heavens themselves, opening a small passage. Zik couldn't believe that they were seeing the real heavenly gates, because they were supposed to open by themselves. Malin noticed the guys and realized that they were again doubting the judge's amazing powers. Zik believed that he was not powerful enough, but he patronized and conducted tests for the contestants. And he was so powerful that he could control Mother Nature herself. The judge was a god whom they had worshipped for 500 years. The contestants prayed for luck this time, some of them having been at this level for more than 3 years. Even Fried and Zeke argued among themselves about who would get the chance to advance to the next level. As the gates continued to open, the roots of Physis' power began to break, which he clearly did not expect. Suddenly, all the roots collapsed in an instant. The judge just stood there and watched in amazement. Physis apologized to Malin and said that the gates had broken and there was no other choice. The contestants were furious because the judge had failed to do his job and left like a charlatan. The people's shouts at him infuriated Physis to the extreme, and he decided to use his power. The judge used the anger of the earth, unleashing roots on the contestants out of his rage. The roots pierced the contestants one by one, taking the lives of innocent people and their birds. Fried took his sword in his hands and managed to strike the roots with the light of memory before they reached Zika and him. Physis said that the tree had reached the end of its life and that replacing it would be very expensive. Next time, they would surely annoy it again, so the judge came up with something. So this time, Physis was going to send 4 people up in exchange for the service. Not all the contestants died, and the wounded were very happy about this opportunity. People are burning with an incredible desire to get to the second level. They will take 4 people at once. The goal was the tree. The red-haired guy ran away. 2 contestants flew after him, quickly catching up with the young man. This place is too dangerous, and it's not even about the contestants. This place is dangerous in itself. 3 hours earlier, people gathered at the heart of Icarus, a forest of tree roots. Malin revealed that this forest was particularly important to the judge. It was this forest that supported the clouds on which Icarus stood. The forest is equipped with modern safety measures. Traps are installed everywhere. The judge did everything in the forest to make life extremely difficult for the contestants. Some self-confident contestants were not afraid of the traps hidden in the roots. Malin threw an apple to demonstrate one of them. In a split second, small roots pierced the apple and destroyed it. Noticing the broken fruit, the penguin rushed towards it, crying over the delicacy that was on the ground. But Zik revealed to his pet that they still had plenty of fruit, a whole bag for him. The contestants were going to have fun, destroying anyone who stood in their way. Having developed a desire for battle, Fried and Zeke immediately agreed to start searching for that very tree, fighting everyone in their path. And so began their survival in the forest of tree roots. The number of casualties among the contestants grew, and so did the competition. At this time, Zik and Fried were trying to survive as a huge boulder rolled toward them. As the main character ran for his life, he blamed the penguin, saying it was all because he had touched it. As they continued to run, the boys noticed huge flycatchers in front of them, which were also hostile towards them. After some time, the boys managed to survive, although it took a lot of effort. You can't take your eyes off the penguin for a second, because he's caused trouble again. The pet said it was time to get used to it. Zeke began to argue with the penguin, while Fried and his bird noticed monsters above them. The guys will have to deal with their enemies because they were facing the very creatures of the forest. Activating the penguin's power, the main character rushed into battle, immediately attacking the flying beast. After striking them, Fried and Zeke were surprised to see that the monsters were not injured at all. Fried asked his friend to use his abilities with caution. Therefore, Fried decided to use his new ability. Raising his blade, dozens of golden swords appeared around the beast, creating a whirlwind. But even the golden whirlwind of blades was useless, leaving the monsters unharmed. Before attacking the beetle, Zik wanted to ask the grumpy man how to use his powers. But right in front of the enemy, the main character was furious because the penguin had forgotten how to use his abilities. The creature was not going to stand idly by and immediately began a barrage of attacks on Zik. The main character managed to counterattack, unleashing a new attack from a wave of dark energy. The unexpected burst of energy was so powerful that it sent the monster to the ground. Then, when Zika was attacked by security guards in the office, his powers were also unleashed. Although the entity was still alive, Zika now had a better understanding of his penguin abilities. The main character decided to try out this power right away, waiting for the beetle's attack in a blocking stance. Immediately after the block, a counterattack followed. The glove easily withstood the enemy's force. Zik asked Fried to leave the bugs to him, because with an understanding of his powers, he would be able to defeat his enemies. The main character lured all the bugs to himself and tried to block attacks from all sides. Blocking all attacks, Zik was going to reach his limit in order to finally unleash this power. Fried wanted to know why his friend didn't use such abilities right away. Zik replied that he needed time to warm up. Even though the main character defeated a group of bugs, even more enemies appeared from the depths of the forest. Zeke asked his friend to cover him while he cut through the roots, and the guy immediately soared into the air. Thanks to his jump into the air, Zeke rushed to the first bug and struck the first blow. The roots were preventing Zeke from moving, and noticing this, Fried sent a rain of swords to help him. The ferocious monster grabbed Zeke with its claws and was about to strike him with its sharp teeth. But as soon as he understood how to use his powers, Zeke no longer considered the beetles his enemies. The first beetle was defeated, and the main character flew up into the sky to regroup. Zik asked Fried to be careful, using a wild fist that destroyed everything around him. Zik single-handedly killed another group of bugs, which was even watched by a stranger. The girl came down to the group, and they thought she wanted to attack. But she was just so fascinated by what she was seeing that she couldn't tear herself away. The stranger asked the guys if they would become her colleagues, or if death would overtake them. It turned out that one of the bugs was still alive. It got up and wanted to attack the girl from behind. With a swing of her hammer, the stranger created a small explosion that struck the creature. The mantis fell to the ground, its body scorched by the flames, and life had already left its body. Usually, when the girl swung her hammer, all the contestants ran away. But Zeke turned out to be tough. The girl suggested they become colleagues. Considering that only 4 people would pass, working together would make it easier for them. Fried thought it was a good idea, but Zik said that the aunt could go wherever she was going, because he wasn't interested. The stranger was angry at being called auntie, and wondered where Zik's manners were. Zeke easily blocked her hammer blow, leaving the girl in shock. The next attack also failed. Zik's insolence infuriated the stranger, but her attacks were ineffective. The main character was too careless about her attacks. After another swing, Zik decided to dodge. The girl just wanted to deliver a powerful blow, but Zik ducked and counterattacked. The main character said mockingly that she was upsetting him and asked him to be colleagues. The stranger swung the hammer behind her back and became more serious, saying that now she would really teach him some manners. The girl already had a rough idea of the main character's fighting style. The girl anticipated that Zeke had another annoying ability, but she decided to attack. The ability to absorb power is despicable, and the girl was interested in how much power he could absorb. The hammer attacks became much stronger, creating flashes of fire that exceeded their previous size. Zik could barely block the hammer attacks, but still suffered minor injuries. When the main character jumped back, noticing that the girl's weapon had become much larger. As the resonance from the blow increases, the hammer becomes larger and its flames become hotter. In addition to all of the above abilities, The girl's hammer is equipped with a flamethrower-like device. Now, during hammer attacks, Zik's entire body was subjected to bursts of fire. The main character understood that if his body was struck by the hammer, he would die instantly. The girl's ability is incredible. Even Zika's glove is unable to absorb all the damage. Moreover, the stranger handled the axe so easily, as if it were a toy. At this rate, the main character would lose. The girl noticed Zika's coolness, because she didn't think he would survive the last attack. She suggested stopping the fight because if they continued, Zik would simply die. Despite his fatigue and injuries, the young man got up, saying that the game was not over yet. The girl's patience had reached its limit, and fiery wings appeared behind her, unleashing even more power. The explosion of flames struck the ground, creating an even greater whirlwind of fire straight at Zika. As the flames engulfed the boy, his gloves couldn't withstand such power and flew off, frightening even the penguin. The girl declared that she had lost interest, because she had warned Zika that it was time to stop. The main character's eyes changed color, and coughing up blood he shouted that this was not the end. The dark energy could not be stopped. Its bursts were so strong that the fire went out. The pet was also shocked, because now Zeke had learned to use its power without asking. Absorbing the penguin, a huge dragon made of dark energy appeared around the main character. The dragon spread its wings and began to roar, filling the air around it with the loudness of its cry. Even the contestants in the distance heard a noise that sent shivers down their spines. A stranger jumped from tree to tree, wondering what dark energy had enveloped the forest. It was time for the first attack, and a sphere of energy began to form in the dragon's mouth. The girl was frightened by such power, and Fried tried to call Zika to wake him up. But it was useless. He continued to charge the dragon's breath in the monster's mouth. The kids had to run away, but the girl didn't understand how they could escape this attack. When all hope began to fade, Ruin decided to take flight and head straight for the dragon. Ruin found Zeke's body and rushed straight into the dragon's body made of dark energy. The bird managed to strike the back of the main character's head with its beak to knock him out. When Zeke lost consciousness, the dark dragon began to slowly disappear, never completing its attack. Fried praised his bird, but still couldn't hide his surprise at his friend's terrifying power. When Zeke woke up, he couldn't understand why the penguin was sitting next to him. The bird revealed that he was worried. The girl was also alive, and she began to praise the main character, saying that she had expected this of him. Zik was angry, not understanding why his aunt was still alive. The girl thought that they were worried about her. As it turned out, the main character did not remember what happened when he lost consciousness, but Fried told him everything. The girl rejoiced in her victory in the duel, while Zik demanded a rematch because he was afraid to hit her. But the thief sometimes doubted that the stranger was a girl at all because of her large muscles. While the kids were resting after the fights, a child in a light-colored suit with a slingshot watched them. The girl wondered why such children wanted to become contenders, while the penguin tried to feed the stranger's bird. But the penguin failed. Fried explained that he had no choice, because it was his family's business. And Zeke became a contender because it was his only chance to change his fate. The girl wanted to know about his family, but Zeke had to tell her that his father had died when he was younger, and that he had been alone ever since. The child promised himself that he would do whatever it took to survive in this world and change his fate. The girl couldn't believe that the main character had come all this way at such a young age. Ziku thought it was a joke, but he was completely serious. The main character had to reach the 9th cloud floor and get to heaven. The first person to ascend to heaven becomes the master of heaven and will rule the world. But in 500 years, no one had made it to heaven, so these dreams were empty inside. Right now, they are all going up one more floor. Others just wanted to live a rich life. The closer they got to heaven, the more seeds you had. But even if Zeke didn't go that far, he could still change this world, according to the girl. Fried asked the stranger why she had become a contender in her case. But for some reason, the guys passed out, and their birds also fell asleep in a matter of seconds. The kid stretched his arms, saying that he had easily sent the group of guys to the land of dreams. As expected in the child's mind, the drug he had prepared had an excellent effect. But Fried noticed in advance that the soup had a strange smell, so he became curious. Standing in front of the child, the guy wanted to find out about the drug while the kid was scared out of his wits. As it turned out, Fried had been taught to be a pretender, so he had a feel for these kinds of things. In desperation, the child took out a slingshot, pulled the string, and apologized before shooting. But even after shooting, the child failed, because Fried simply shook his head. The guy didn't even strain himself. He easily took the child by the hand, neutralizing his slingshot attacks. The child was tied up, and when Zik woke up, he angrily mocked him for being drugged. Zik didn't think the child's theft was right, even though he was a thief himself, albeit an older one. Fried examined the child's bag, and the child screamed at him not to touch his precious belongings. Not only did all the items inside belong to him, but the child had personally prepared the drugs. The old bird appeared before the boys and asked them to let the child go, because the child had met him, an old man, and couldn't even use his powers. Despite all his efforts, the child had come all this way to the test on his own. The girl decided to take Dean with her, which Zik did not understand, why the story was developing in this direction. Now in good spirits, the team of 4 set off in search of the tree's essence. The team decided to stop and wait out the night. Although they hadn't slept, they were ready to stay awake. Zeke didn't want to get up and continued to sleep, so the girl had to nudge him with her elbow. An hour later, the group found themselves at the heart of the root forest, where they began a battle with another group. The girl easily defeated her enemy with an axe, while Fried fought another man with swords. With a lunge, Fried struck him with his brilliant magic, knocking the sword out of his opponent's hands. One of the enemies wanted to attack Fried from behind, but a shot from afar saved him. The shooter was Dean, which was noticed by another member of the enemy group, who managed to find him. But this time, the main character came to the rescue, stopping the enemy's dagger with his glove. Blocking the blow, Zeke counterattacked, absorbing its power and also striking down the last member of the enemy group. More and more challengers appeared, which meant that the survival program was coming to an end. Fried and the girl sent their pets inside themselves to rest and regain their strength. Zik and the penguin saw such magic for the first time, so they wondered about what they had seen. The girl revealed that it was possible to merge with your partner's body to rest. Once they became partners, humans and birds could share their life force, and birds could recover in human bodies. But the group had more important concerns. The girl was puzzled because she could not find the essence of the tree. There was only one place left where the essence could be found, straight above. It was the only place the guys hadn't looked yet, because there was some kind of light there. The friends flew up to reach the new place, noticing that the color of the tree had changed. It was also noticeable that there were many identical nutrients on the trees. In other words, there was a high probability that they were one and the same. Flying even higher, the guys found themselves trapped by dozens of roots that wrapped around their weapons. It was worth running away from this place, but the roots were faster, so the guys fought them off. There were too many roots, and it was impossible to avoid them all, so Fried began to fight them off with his abilities. The girl began to swing her hammer, causing the roots to burst into red flames. The main character continued to block attacks and counterattack with bursts of dark energy. The girl noticed that the presence of traps meant that the essence of the tree was definitely here. The main character noticed something important. Their new friend, the child Dean, had suddenly disappeared. Dean had flown away at that moment. He knew where the essence of the tree was, so he no longer needed to stay with his group. The child wanted to sell the essence to others to get rich, but he regretted that Zeke had to suffer for it. When Dean wanted to go to the tree essence, some guy stopped him, which angered the child. The sight of the child made the guy feel disgust comparable to stepping in feces. While the group continued to search for Dean pointlessly, he decided to return to them on his own. But the child and his bird were badly injured, and he could no longer stand on his own 2 feet. The guy finally learned the child's name because he asked him for information, but he didn't even hear his name. The most important thing for the guy was to find out where the essence of the tree was, because Dean had kept quiet about it. And if they told him any information, the boy would spare Dean's life. The main character told the stranger to take his foot off the child, but a light from above distracted them both. This light turned out to be small white branches, the very essence of the tree that all the contenders were looking for. The guy said that now the group wouldn't have to do anything else to save Dean. One of the stranger's henchmen asked Zeke how he dared to look at his boss like that. The follower attacked the main character, but he didn't even pay attention to him, throwing him back. Anger overwhelmed Zika. He looked at the boss and declared that his life would end at his hands. The other followers grabbed their weapons to avenge their wounded leader. The girl and Fried also took up arms to help the main character in battle. Without using their abilities, just by swinging their weapons, Zika's group defeated the insolent stranger's henchmen. The guys declared that the stranger would have to pay for messing with Fried's comrades. The guy took up his weapon and said that it was all so ridiculous that he would play with them himself. Pointing his finger at them, the stranger asked Zika's group to attack him all together if they weren't afraid. The girl attacked first, but to her surprise, the stranger stopped her hammer with his bare hands. Fried immediately launched a second attack, but the stranger dodged it with a smirk on his face. The main character delivered a third blow, which the stranger did not even try to dodge. The guy used a lightning strike, his hands covered with blue tongues of lightning, while Zika marveled at the stranger's strength. With a blow of his hand, a streak of lightning swept across the ground, throwing Zeke's group back a dozen meters. After just one lightning-fast attack from the stranger, Zeke's entire group was injured. The power of the man before them was terrifying, and the main character couldn't even comprehend how strong he truly was. Zik asked the guys to take the tree essence while he held off the stranger, but the girl knew that this was madness, as Zik would not be able to defeat him one-on-one. Fried understood Zek's plan, because if they didn't delay the stranger, they would lose the tree essence. Nevertheless, the girl decided to accept these conditions, so she and Fried went upstairs. The guy's hand was covered in lightning again, and he said that Zeke didn't stand a chance. To stop Fried and the girl, the stranger sent lightning through the trees, which caught up with them. Zik immediately attacked him to stop him from interfering with his friends. But the guy easily blocked the blow, calling Zik's gloves nothing more than a toy. Lightning shot through the main character's body, piercing it like needles from every possible point. If Zik tried to absorb his power, he would die from the strain, and there were no other options. While the main character was trying to come up with a new option for the battle, he noticed the roots. The guy flew into the air to stop Zik's allies and told him to wait below. The main character understood the stranger's intentions, so he immediately followed him and attacked. The guy realized that his opponent was not going to give up, so he released an even stronger lightning bolt. But Zik wrapped a vine around his gloves, thus deflecting the lightning away from himself. Now he could absorb the guy's power without any problems. Absorbing the power, Zik became stronger, and now he could dominate the stranger. Having taken his first damage of the fight, the guy was furious, saying that Zik would die first. The main character wanted to see how he would do that, rushing into battle with his newfound strength. The duo continued to swing their fists at each other, this time fighting on equal terms. When one was struck, the other immediately counterattacked, but Zika's strength proved to be greater. The young man had to grab his sword. He could no longer control himself. All he wanted was Zika's death. The main character blocked the blow with his sword, noticing that his enemy was behaving like a wild beast. Come to think of it, Zik could see similarities between the stranger and those who had nearly killed him in the lower lands. The guy knew about these people, and they were under his command. He finally learned that it was Zik who had killed them, and now his desire for revenge became even stronger. They weren't just guys who served him. It was because of Zik that they couldn't ascend to heaven. His investigators went to deal with some kid, and the stranger couldn't believe that he had now met him in person. Now the guy definitely couldn't forgive him, putting even more force into his blows than before. Zik continued to block the attacks, but asked his friends to hurry, because the enemy was going crazy. The essence of the tree was stronger than expected, but they almost tore it off. Zik still had to buy some time. The main character told his friends that he would soon die if they didn't manage to tear off the essence of the tree. As the stranger ran to attack, he suddenly stepped into a trap that stopped him. As it turned out, it was Dean who had set the trap, as he had managed to recover. Using his slingshot, the child shot the boss with a bullet that exploded in a cloud of smoke. At that moment, Fried shouted that they had finally managed to get the essence of the tree. Zik happily decided that it was time to flee the fierce battlefield, taking the barely recovered Dean with him. The boss had no choice but to unleash all his power to prevent his enemies from escaping. Releasing 2 bursts of lightning, the guy used a new electric tiger technique. The majestic electric tiger was quite nimble, almost catching up with the terrified Zik with Dean in his arms. The tiger created from electricity was capable of acting on its own, even striking with its paw during the chase. But soon the electric technique dissipated, and the boss was left in complete despair and failed the test. Thesis was terribly bored, and Malin noticed that it was he who deliberately started the game of survival for the sake of the heavenly door. The judge also deliberately ruined the essence of the tree, because he was bored. The consequences, if this became known, could be unimaginable. In any case, the game should have ended already. Thesis initially thought it would be fun, but he quickly lost interest. Malin offered him an alternative, to make a bet with her about who would be the first to emerge as the winner of the game. Hearing this proposal, Thesis's eyes lit up and he immediately got up because gambling was one of his interests. Malin nominated a candidate named Greggs. In her opinion, he was sure to make a name for himself in the future. Thesis was confident in his choice. The judge chose the guy who dared to tell him to his face that he would be the ruler of the heavens. And immediately after these words, Thesis' words came true, and a joyful Zik entered the garden, holding the essence in his hands. The contestants around him were shocked, because according to rumors, the root forest was extremely dangerous, and Zek's group looked like a bunch of children. One of the contestants couldn't bear to watch this spectacle, which was pushing his nerves to the limit. After all, he had once again missed his chance to go up to the second floor. He had been rotting on the first floor for 3 years, believing that Thesis should allow him to move up to the next level. The contestant asked them what they were going to do about it, to which the enraged guy suggested starting a riot. But one of them understood that by going against the judge, he would simply kill them. The guard heard the noise from afar and decided to find out why the guys were being so loud. This was the last straw for the contestant. He couldn't hold back and summoned his power, unleashing it on the guard. The guard didn't even have time to react when the other contestants struck them with their magical bird weapons. Seeing such an act of insubordination, the other contestants were motivated to go against Judge Physis in order to advance to the second level. Zik was confident that he had fulfilled Physis's conditions, hoping that he would not break his promise just because he was lazy. But this time, the judge felt very energetic, and now he was ready to send the guys straight to the top. The energy also came from winning the argument, but it was time to begin the ritual of opening the gates. For the second time, the roots of the tree's essence had grown so much that the branches reached the heavens, tearing them apart to open the portal. Physis kept his promise and actually opened the heavenly gates, even surprising the girl that they could really rise higher. Ruins did not show it, but he also anticipated ascending to the second level, hoping that this place would satisfy him. At that moment, Dean realized how terribly he had treated his allies and decided to apologize to everyone. But Zik said that was enough, because in the end everything turned out well, so Dean didn't need to worry about it. Penguin began to mock Zik, suggesting that he was playing the role of a good guy. The main character asked his pet what that insolent expression on his face was. The Penguin and Zeke began arguing again, while Ruin added that pre-flight disturbances were prohibited, so they had to stop immediately. Physis saw happiness in this group, and sincerely hoped that these smiles would not fade from the faces of such a young generation. But while the guys were enjoying their success, a group of dissatisfied rebels came to the place where the heavenly gates were opening. Malin said that sending everyone to the next floor would damage the judge's prison system, and then the entire Icarus would be in danger. But the rebels did not even try to listen to their words. They only had their own interests in mind, so they rushed into battle for freedom. Malin had no choice but to order the guards to defend themselves against the rebels and quell the discontent. But the rebels were too serious, and they dealt ruthlessly with any guards who stood in their way. Finally, Malin realized the seriousness of the situation and had to call upon her weapon, the Windblade. The pretenders wanted to attack Physis, and Malin couldn't let that happen. But she was surrounded on all sides, so she had to defend herself. The judge was furious, so enraged by this senseless rebellion that he decided to join the fight against them himself. Using the power of nature, connecting branches together, Physis managed to create a wooden giant. Ludicium Dei struck the ground, and the huge hand of the wooden ent easily threw dozens of pathetic rebels aside. The rebels were frightened by the sight of the huge wooden golem, but continued their battle with it, regardless of its strength and size. But as soon as their allies began to fall one after another, these cowards realized their futile position against the judge. Zik no longer understood what was happening as the judge mercilessly defeated the rebels who had dared to anger him. The foolish pretenders knew nothing about the installers. There was no point in going up there, let alone rebelling against the judge. Physis was tired of putting up with it. His nerves were at their limit, and he broke the hard-won tree essences. He was sorry to break his promise, but now that everything had turned out this way, Zika's group had to stay in the city of Icarus. Physis decided that from now on, he would not let a single contender slip by, spreading his roots throughout the city. The judge did not keep track of his abilities, and the roots grew to such an extent that they killed innocent citizens, depriving them of their families. Zeke didn't want to see this. He had suffered enough pain on that day in his childhood, and the main character didn't want it to happen again. They simply killed people for seeds, and Zik promised himself to change this world and survive the coming hell. Spreading his wings, the young man rushed into the air to stop Physis, who had begun to act recklessly. Zeke's attack was useless because the bark was too thick in relation to the main character's strength, but the thief's confidence was intact. He was here to make Physis keep his word. The penguin noticed that Zeke wanted to gain more power through anger. Realizing that this was entirely possible, the pet asked the main character to focus his power on his hands, as now was the time to grow to a new level. Zeke didn't fully understand what was going on, but the bird's instincts told him so the main character decided to try this method. To his surprise, thanks to the penguin's thinking, Zeke's ordinary gloves turned into huge claws. Physis wanted to attack Zeke, but his newly acquired weapon proved to be extremely effective, allowing him to block the attack without difficulty. The hero not only blocked Physis's attack, but also successfully continued his attack, cutting through the entire body of the wooden ent. But even this proved useless, as the wooden golem could completely regenerate its body in a matter of seconds. Ziku didn't care about regeneration. He just decided to attack harder, so as not to give Physis time to recover. Fried helped the citizens who were in despair at the sight of the judge's bad side, as did Malin, who was in shock. Fried didn't understand why the girl was doing nothing while everyone around her was dying. Malin said that without the judge's order, she couldn't do anything. The guy asked her how long she was going to wait for the judge's instructions, because at this rate, the whole city would be destroyed. When a person's life was in danger next to Malin, she had to act despite the fact that the judge had not given her any orders. Malin apologized to Thesis, but from that moment on, she would have to break the rules for the good of the residents in the city. Meanwhile, Zik continued to mercilessly chop off the wooden Ent's body parts, which it successfully regenerated back. But his attacks were getting faster and stronger, and soon the main character was able to break through to Phisis's body inside the golem. With one blow, Zik knocked the judge off his wooden golem technique straight to the ground, making Physis laugh. Physis resorted to extreme measures and tried to strike the main character with a quick attack from the vines, but he was ready for it. Zik swung his new claws, and the vines were immediately torn apart. The hero told Physis that his techniques no longer worked on him. The judge reminded Zik that he liked to talk about how he would become the ruler of the heavens. Physis would have gladly continued playing with him, but he was tired of fooling around. Summoning 2 grass blades above his head, Physis told Zik that they could begin the second round of their battle. At that time, Zico's team, together with Malin, successfully helped citizens reach safety amid the chaos. Malin noticed how worried Fried was about Zika, and told him that he should go help him, as she could handle things here on her own. Fried quickly arrived at the battlefield, noticing that the judge was in a winning position, surpassing Zika. His friend rushed to the ground to help. Physis realized that these were Zika's assistants, noting that friendship is cool. But Fried was too late, as the judge could have killed Zika at any moment while he was trying to fight back. Fried managed to fire 2 shots and told the judge to try to kill the main character if he dared to do so. The first attack was from Fried, who swung his sword with all his might, but Phisis's wooden arm blocked the blow. The guy jumped back, raised his sword, and called upon the technique of light memory, creating dozens of solar balls above his head. These balls pursued the judge, and glowing blades rained down on him like hail, but his speed exceeded Fried's technique. Even when Fried tried to diversify his technique, Physis easily blocked the blades with walls of vines. But Fried broke through the vines, trying his best to avenge his best friend in a battle for life. Physis was faster, gritting his teeth. The judge stopped the young fighter by grabbing him by the neck as he swung for the blow. While the referee held the young man by the neck, he wielded his blades, calling 2 grass blades to him from behind. Physis called the blades to him, cutting through Frida's shoulders in the process, and threw him down, causing him to immediately fall to his knees. The judge wanted to take Frida's life so that he could join Ziku, but the main character was alive and ready to continue the battle. Physis called him a problem child, because no matter how many times they tried to attack, the result would be the same. The judge only asked them to die faster. Ziku hated to admit it, but he couldn't handle Physis alone, so they had to attack together. Summoning their willpower, the 2 best friends rushed into battle, but the judge only snorted in response, preparing to attack the teenagers. Saying it was useless, Physis sent the grass blades into battle, and the boys began to fight them off with all their might. The main character told Frizz not to give up, because if he gave up now, they wouldn't even make it to the next floor, let alone heaven. Instead of being self-centered and pursuing his dream alone, Zik tried to keep Fried from giving up. Fried stood up and said he was just getting started. Zik reminded him of the time they fought together against a monster. The friends were at a disadvantage then, just like now, but they were able to overcome that insane obstacle on their journey together. Fried wasn't sure if it would work in this situation, but they had no choice, so Zeke convinced him otherwise. Sometimes you have to take risks, even if it's reckless. They had to. After all, there would only be one chance. First, the guys jumped back. Physis wanted to see what his enemies would do. Zik and Fried began to attack from different flanks. Zika's speed increased. He attacked, but instead of simply colliding, he raised a smokescreen. While Physis was expecting an attack from the thief, Fried rushed at him from the rear flank, whom he did not immediately notice. The referee was sure that such a small trick would not work, but instead of attacking, Fried simply ran through him. While Physis's attention was distracted by Fried, Zik appeared behind him, ready to attack the man. Now, Zik had his fists raised, and Fried had his sword behind his back. Physis realized that they were going to attack him by surprise. As the guys rushed at him with their attacks, Physis tried to summon the Hortulanus Frofex to him. Although the blades managed to defend the judge in time, the combined strength of the best friends was able to defeat him. The townspeople saw something they couldn't believe. The roots began to disappear, which meant only one thing. Physis had lost. The citizens rejoiced that they had survived this catastrophe, which had put the entire city in mortal danger. At that moment, new gates of heaven opened, through which the contenders for the second level of heaven were already rushing. The guys surrounded Frida and Zik, praising their skills, because these two had saved the entire city in its hour of greatest danger. But while the citizens were greeting their heroes, the girl took Frida and Zika with her, and they moved on. It was a happy moment for the main character, but the guys insisted that they were very busy now. Zik wanted to leave a little later, because he was happy with his achievement, but they had already stayed too long at this level. But the main character changed his mind, so waving goodbye to the citizens, he couldn't stop smiling. When the group reached the gates, which were slowly closing, Thesis came to his senses and watched them. He immediately became angry and decided that he could not just let this group go to the next level of heaven. The wooden hand caught up with the guys, and Zik realized that Thesis was going to completely destroy the heavenly gates. Time was running out, and the main character was trying to understand how his power worked during anger, because he was getting a strange surge of power. While his friends went ahead, Zeke turned around, hoping that this would be his next chance to ascend to the next level. He didn't know how to control this power yet, but if he concentrated all his energy in his hand, Zeke felt he could do it. Thesis was determined, but Zeke also wanted to defeat him. The one who was more confident would win. The main character's hand covered the dark dragon's head, and two terrifying forces collided with each other. Noticing the dragon, the judge immediately understood the outcome of this fight. The dragon's head crushed the wooden hand. The main character smiled and told Thesis that he was leaving, asking him to be kinder to people, and also saying goodbye to Maylene. The judge was devastated. He could only watch the kids fly away while Maylene said goodbye to them and asked them not to break the rules. Soon, everyone flew away. Thesis himself did not understand why he had so desperately prevented the boys from rising higher into the sky. As a judge, he was obliged to choose at least one of the contestants, but in fact, he chose no one and kept them until the last moment. Even knowing about the growing hatred, Thesis did not want to let them go. He knew that because of the frequent clashes, it would be impossible to keep the contenders. But he endured anyway. The higher you climb into the heavens, the more you realize how ugly this world is. Thesis believed that the teenagers would fall into despair, as he had. But Zik said that he would go to paradise and perhaps see another world in the one that had been dead for 500 years. Milan asked the judge if he had defended Icarus with a calm face, even amid despair and regret, because everyone liked the image of his judge. While the broken judge sat on the ground, the citizens gathered and decided to go to Thesis in person. The little girl burst into tears and asked Mr. Thesis to stop and become the person they knew before. Milan noticed the sadness on the judge's face and asked everyone to cheer up so they could start putting things in order. Fried turned to his comrades and joyfully declared that he could not have done it alone. While everyone was celebrating their success, the main character noticed a bright mark on his shoulder. It was a heavenly symbol. It was given to candidates who had passed the test set by the judge. Zik was surprised to realize that if it weren't for this mark, none of their group would have been able to reach the second level. The group had just received the approval of the first judge, and there were 9 levels ahead in the heavens. Now they had to receive assignments from 8 more judges and pass them, because if they moved on to the next level of clouds while violating this condition, punishment would follow. At least they had passed the fruit-finding test. This was considered a certain overcoming of the test of fate. But, in addition to this, they had a sign, so no one should have any questions about passing to the next stage. Zik flew confidently toward the passage, but he was quickly stopped by flying debris that hit him in the head. Turning around, the thief wanted to find out the source of this debris, which turned out to be a huge tornado. Dean considered the whirlwind to be nothing, and at that moment, a couple of contestants decided to break through it. But as soon as they got close to the tornado, its power far exceeded the contestants' abilities, knocking them unconscious. This frightened the child, and he suggested that the first level was still good, offering to go back down. The main character did not want to return to this sleepy realm, and Dean was more concerned for his life than anything else. The wind turned out to be much stronger than anyone expected, and Fried believed that they needed to stay together in order to break through with the same team. The gusts of wind hit the main character, but he managed to put on his gloves, blocking the strong gusts. By redirecting all the force of the natural disaster into his glove, Zeke was able to gather enough strength to destroy the whirlwind. But the whirlwind immediately reappeared, this time much larger and stronger than before, baffling the contestants. The unexpected force of the natural disaster caught the group off guard, and in a split second, they found themselves inside the hurricane. The storm carried Zeke to another place, throwing him into a distant area full of forests and fields. The fall was brutal. And even though Zik landed on soft ground, he and his pet were badly injured. The main character got up to explore the area where he found himself. And the first thing he noticed was an unfamiliar girl hiding behind a tree. The guy tried to talk to the stranger, but she immediately got scared and hid behind the nearest tree with a squeal. The penguin mocked Zik's face, and the thief said it was all his fault because he crashed due to the bird's weakness. The girl noticed the main character's injuries. Her excitement got the better of her, and she wanted to know the extent of his injuries. Zik hadn't yet noticed that his arm had been pierced by a branch, but when he saw it, he was greatly frightened. The girl was overcome with happiness. She immediately rushed to the boy's side, took out a small star, and asked him to wait a moment. Thanks to the mysterious object of the stranger, the main character's arm healed perfectly, leaving no traces behind. The guy immediately wanted to know who the girl was, and she proudly revealed that she was the best healer in the Kingdom of Labor. The stranger wanted to know where Zik had come from, because there was nothing dangerous at this level that could cause such suffering. The main character immediately revealed that they had been caught in a tornado before that. Soon, Zik fully realized that he and his friends had finally arrived at the second level of heaven, the crossroads. The girl was surprised to learn that Zik had risen from the first floor. It was her first time seeing a contender. She told the main character to be careful, as there were many dangers here. Although you wouldn't know it from the appearance of this level. Without looking at his hand, Zik said that he could handle any adventure because the girl had healed him. But as soon as he saw it, the guy was shocked. The girl revealed that the treatment had a side effect. Suddenly, the stranger began to leave, adding that it would soon pass. But Zik didn't want to let her go, because he was worried about his hand. But no matter how much he called after her, the girl ran away. And when the thief turned around, he noticed guards chasing after them on horseback. The knights galloped past Zik, not interested in him, as their goal was to capture a certain witch. The target turned out to be the same unfamiliar girl. When one of the knights caught up with her, he struck her with his sword without hesitation. The helpless girl fell to the ground, surrounded by knights who rejoiced at their prey. The knights were about to seize the girl, but the main character could not just stand by and watch. So he decided to come to her aid. The man was surprised, because the stranger dared to interfere with the order of knights, even though he did not have enough strength to overcome Zika. First of all, the main character learned the girl's name. She was called Stella, after which he pinned the knight to the ground. Turning to the two remaining knights, Zik asked Stella to run away if she didn't want to be captured again. The knights wanted to know how this bold young man dared to resist knights who had received orders from the king himself. But Zik didn't care because Stella reminded him of his past, in which he also bore a stigma and often wandered alone. The knights enraged the main character, and in a fit of rage against his enemies, the boy used his wild fang ability. The weak guards were defeated, and another knight in different armor appeared from the cloud of dust. The knight immediately joined the fight, lunging forward, and the guard attacked with his pike. The man was sure that this attack would sever Zika's arm, but thanks to his reflexes and gloves, he was able to defend himself. The main character declared that such an attack would not work on him, inviting his enemy to attack. The knight took a stance, asking Zika if the cocky guy could dodge the next attack. While Zika was preparing for the enemy's attack, everything happened quickly, and the man suddenly disappeared from the battlefield. In fact, the knight was on top of Zik, crushing the ground beneath his feet. The main character managed to jump back, but did not expect such an attack. His body felt as if it had been crushed by iron, even though all he had done was dodge the attack. With the weight on his body, Zik continued to dodge the knight's barrage of attacks. Each attack from the knight gave the main character more strength, and in the end, he was able to unleash a wild punch, but the blow failed to reach its target, for the power accumulated inside the gloves was not enough. The knight laughed, for this was exactly what he expected from a bandit who had just arrived at a new heavenly level. The warrior once again aimed his spear at the ground, gathering more and more speed while Zik waited for the enemy to approach. The chicken knife attack crashed into the lowlands, rapidly pursuing the main character. The thief decided to spread his wings and dodge the attack in the air, but he couldn't rise. The wings suddenly disappeared, surprising Zik, because now he was directly under the attack. The main character was thrown back, and at that moment, the knight immediately continued his attack. Before he could react, Zik already had to block a new barrage of attacks from the sharp spear. All this was not in vain, because this power accumulated inside the gloves, and the main character was able to return the damage he had received. That's what Zik thought. But in reality, the knight stood motionless, as if the attack had not affected him. While the surprised guy was trying to understand what had happened, his emotions were overshadowed by a new attack. Zik could no longer resist such an enemy and was the first to fall in this fierce battle. The leader ordered the guards, who had regained their senses, to take advantage of this excellent opportunity and finally capture the witch outside the kingdom. After the battle, the leader looked at his armor, which had a crack in it. He was surprised that this challenger had shown such strength before the trials had even begun. The knights hurried to catch the witch, as they were already approaching enemy territory. However, the guards did not manage to catch up with the girl, as dozens of creatures appeared before them. The knights were going to go all the way and take the witch's life, but the monsters' faces frightened the men. It was absolutely clear to the guards that if they crossed this line, they would die immediately. In order to avoid heavy losses, the knights decided to flee while the monsters watched their pitiful escape. The monster told Stella that when she left the kingdom, she was putting everyone in danger. Stella justified her escape by saying that she thought she saw a star falling from the sky, which is why she ran. But Zeke also remained in the girl's thoughts, because at that moment he was being beaten by the guards. Zeke was unconscious and suddenly woke up when a girl from his team woke him up with a violent blow. The guys were in the underground prison of Labor Castle. Almost the entire group had gathered, but Frida was not with them. The main character immediately found this heavenly level strange. But to Dina's surprise, Zeke did not consider the prison to be strange. The last time Frida was seen, he was helping the team escape from the tornado, but they split up. In any case, the atmosphere on the first level was completely different, as was the strength of the enemies. Dean agreed with the others because he simply had to fit in with the situation. Zeke suddenly heard someone coming and asked his allies not to give themselves away in front of them. The man entered the room with the guardsmen. He had already heard that the people in front of him were new applicants. Zeke replied that they had indeed just arrived and knew nothing at all, but that he had only helped a weak girl. The man introduced himself as Denzel because he recognized Zeke as the one who had helped the witch. Denzel was a bookseller and priest who guarded the judge of the Kingdom of Labor. The reason why the contenders were captured turned out to be major problems in the Kingdom of Labor. According to Denzel, the townspeople were suddenly faced with famine, and people were dying due to a lack of food. And although the land was originally poor, there was not always enough fruit to live on at this level. This was the case until the witch appeared, for she had previously been the king's servant and assistant. Desiring power, the witch embraced darkness and used an army of monsters to overthrow the ruler. War broke out, many died, but in the end, justice prevailed and the guard won. The witch and her werewolves fled. But they still haven't left Labor Castle alone. The sky was covered with clouds that blocked the seeds falling from the heavens. Because of this, the Kingdom of Labor has been in decline for 30 years. Not long ago, the witch who had been hiding reappeared in the Kingdom of Labor. Zik couldn't believe it had been 30 years ago, because back then the witch was just a child. According to Denzel, the witch did not age. She lived by taking the lives of others, thereby prolonging her own. The girl was indignant, because they were contenders, and had no connection with this witch at all. Denzel suggested that they might be the witch's minions. But in the end, he admitted that they had made a mistake without fully understanding the situation. The man apologized for his mistake, considering it a big misunderstanding. Now the group had to leave, because the judge was waiting for the contenders. In the middle of the room stood a large throne, on which sat King Judge Julius II with his grandsons. King Julius glanced at Zika, and asked his assistant if these were the ones who had started the riot on the first floor, and had come up. The guys did not expect the dialogue to begin this way, and Zik's friends thought they were already in trouble. Dean and the girl wanted to make excuses, but the main character declared that they were the ones who had started the riot. Julius laughed and said that he was not like a first-level judge, asking the guys not to be afraid. The king knew that the contenders had already heard about the kingdom's problems, but he reminded them that the witch Stella had defiled the sky of labor with evil. This witch craved the power of Judge Yuli, and now was the moment when he needed the great power of the contenders. The king needed the fragments of stars from the witch's garden, and this would count as a test that would allow them to rise higher into the sky. Anyone who became a member of the witch hunters would receive full support in their ascent. No matter how much Zik thought about Stella, her eyes seemed too kind for such evil deeds. Julius wanted to check with Zendel whether Zeke was indeed the young man who had contradicted the judge on the first floor. The man confirmed that this was the same contender who had defeated the judge. The king wanted to use Zeke's outstanding power, but Zendel tried to dissuade him, arguing that they were just children, but Julius didn't care. With a malicious grin, he declared that the witch's power should belong to him. The girl suggested that the team join the witch hunters, since they were going to undergo the trial of the star fragments from the witch's garden anyway. Dean added that he couldn't wait to get the treasure, even though it wasn't the main thing for him. The main character revealed that he was the savior of this witch, and therefore he renounced the idea of joining the squad. The guys wondered whether they should stick with Zeke if he kept getting into trouble. Nevertheless, his dragon power was frightening, and if used correctly, it could defeat everyone. But they decided not to make impulsive decisions and agreed that they would stay together no matter what. The girl noticed that there were suitors around them who often stared at them. The main character suggested going to the village because he was worried about Fried's absence. Dean was surprised that his friends refused the riches offered for joining the ranks of witch hunters. On the main street of the Kingdom of Labor, Zeke noticed how the guards were collecting bags of seeds from the residents. The girl had already heard about this, and told the main character that these funds were being collected to fight the witch. The kingdom's anger was growing, and the residents were angry that they were suffering and giving their last money to fight the witch. The last time the group had eaten was in prison, and after so much time had passed, everyone was already very hungry. As soon as Zik wanted to go into a diner to buy food, suddenly a wall nearby fell down and someone fell out of it. Two girls also came out of the hole in the wall and asked the guy why he had ignored their offer. The girls, named Kasta and Polu, offered him cooperation because of his strength, but the guy's dissatisfaction caused discord. The guy became even more angry and asked Kasta if she was trying to divide her enemies with him. Covering their hands with electricity, the guys were going to continue their fight on the street. Kasta threw a couple of daggers, which the guy easily dodged thanks to his lightning-fast reflexes. But to his surprise, Kasta was already close to him, holding another weapon in her hands. The guy's determination did not waver in the slightest. He declared that he was as fast as light and swung his fist back to counterattack. A knight noticed the bursts of power in the distance and immediately realized that this fight had been started by annoying pretenders. After a while, Kasta retreated, unable to overpower the guy. Polu immediately rushed to her sister's aid with excitement. The smug challenger was fired up and challenged the girls to a 2-on-1 fight. As soon as Kasta noticed her sister's strength, she put out her hand and said she could handle it herself. The girl decided to continue the fight, pointing her finger at the challenger, and Kasta's curator marked her target. The challenger called this remark lame and immediately rushed to attack Kasta with daggers. The knight made his way straight to the diner, finding himself right in the middle of the two challengers. Chicken, the head of the Order of Knights of the Kingdom of Labor, spread his wings and threw the challengers aside. The man declared that those who did not pass this level of the test would be unable to fly or break through by force, for he could not be defeated. Zik remembered well that the challenger with electricity was very strong, but he could do nothing against Chicken. He hoped that his wings would return, but only after overcoming the trials of this level. Fried was still in prison. All his friends had been released, and he was left alone. Denzel entered the prison to see Fried and told him that he had broken the rules of the Absolute Clan. The advisor led Fried to the king, who had laid a feast on the table, and asked the young man if he liked the food. Fried did not hide anything, and said that it was the first time in his life he had such a luxurious dinner. At the lowest level, one could not even dream of such food. Julius did not know this, because he was born at the second level and had only heard about it from rumors. Without the power of the Absolute, it would have been impossible to create the current kingdom. And here he learned everything. Fried learned about his family's history only from books, so he had no idea about Julius's connection to the Absolutes. Denzel opened the book and read that the progenitor of the great Absolute, Carindel, strove for the highest ideal in order to achieve balance between the levels and bring prosperity to the destroyed sky. Reaching the 8th level, he gave everything for his goal, and even when he lost his wings and fell, he continued to maintain balance with the power of the Absolute family. Carindel solved the problem of the barren land of the 2nd level and built the Kingdom of Labor. Julius bowed his head and folded his hands before Fried. The kingdom had always revered the people of this family. Fried was very pleased that his family was spoken well of, for he was already proud of them. From generation to generation, the Kingdom of Labor had good relations with the family of Absolutes, until recently. Julius reminded him that the Absolute family had lost a sacred relic many years ago. Before the sky split, the Absolute clan took responsibility for maintaining balance and received symbols of divine equilibrium. But after the split, the relics were lost, the sacred artifacts, and summoned him. Therefore, the family is desperately searching for them. Yuli has only 2 wonderful grandsons left. Several years ago, he lost his son and daughter-in-law. The modern Kingdom of Labor desperately needed the help of the Absolute clan. As it turned out, Julius possessed one of the relics, the Soul Punisher, and was about to make a deal with Fried. The guy immediately realized that one of the most precious things for the clan of Absolutes was at stake. Such an offer could not be refused. The contender was furious at his loss, while Zik sat nearby and mocked him. Before leaving, Kasta reminded him that she had chosen the guy as her target, so she had to kill him. Clenching his fork, the guy promised that he would kill Kasta first after passing the test. The guy asked Zeke how he managed to defeat Physis, since, according to his observations, they were weaklings. The main character offered to show the challenger, but he fell silent at his suggestion. In any case, the challenger was grateful to Zik, because thanks to him, he managed to quickly climb to the second floor. Zik asked the guy if he had seen a friendly person who was with them, referring to Frida. Not hearing an answer, the main character got up and was about to leave. But at the last moment, the challenger said that he was most likely being tested. The guys agreed to finish the feast quickly and go in search of Frida, as well as complete the test. At the site of the witch's garden, a group of werewolves gathered to guard the tree from the contenders. The little werewolf Tiuna declared that the people had been deceived, that this sanctuary was a star garden, located on the territory of the real judge. Tiuna could not show the pretenders the real judge, because as soon as she left, she would immediately become a target. Chicken did not believe this, and considered the werewolves to be followers of the witch who were calling for the destruction of the second level. The captain ordered the contenders to collect star fragments from the garden, which would weaken the witch. As soon as the people rushed forward to carry out the mission, a large werewolf jumped forward and stopped the enemies. The leader of the Tanukan werewolf tribe stood in front of the contenders, calling them foolish because they could not see the truth. Chicken understood the situation they were in, because due to restrictions, the challengers could not even attack the chief. Chicken asked Tanukan where his mistress was, which greatly angered the werewolf. One of the challengers went straight to the garden toward the enraged werewolf, who immediately threw him back. Stella noticed this cruelty and came out of her hiding place, asking the werewolf to stop. Chicken seized the moment and threw his spear at the witch while she was talking to Tanukan. Tanukan was a strong werewolf and easily managed to stop Chicken's flying spear. The chief thought that the knight wanted to start a war, but the werewolf's patience was already running out. Chicken realized the seriousness of the situation and said that he would abide by the agreements between the parties. Stella gathered her strength and fell to her knees, but a bright sign of the judge appeared behind her. The girl introduced herself as a judge named Stella, who assigns the trials that the contenders must undergo. It was difficult for her to explain the situation, but with the help of the contenders, she would be able to put everything back in its place. Chicken asked people not to believe in these tricks, spreading his wings and flapping them to create a gust of wind. Such a strong gust of wind managed to dispel Judge Stella's mark, which was already weakened. The captain showed proof that he had passed the second-level test to confuse the contestants once again. Tanukan lost his temper because Chicken began to insult Mrs. Stella, and the werewolf's anger knew no bounds. Even the anger of his enemies was good news for Chicken, because he presented it as the true face of the witch's minions. Stella tried to calm everyone down, but Tiuna put out her hand and asked them to go with her away from danger. Chicken decided to detain the strongest werewolf, while the contenders rushed for the pieces. Tanukan could do nothing because of Lady Stella's words. He was ready to kill everyone, but he couldn't go against the lady's words. Stella rushed forward, begging everyone to stop the slaughter. One contender swung at the judge, but Tiuna managed to protect her mistress from the sword attack, frightening Stella even more. The girl's emotions were mixed. She became more and more confused, releasing a black aura from herself. Suddenly, Stella completely lost her mind and was covered in a pillar of dark power. Chicken declared that he could see right through his enemies, asking them to stop resisting. Tanukan continued to hold his position, watching as the other werewolves tried to calm Lady Stella down. The weaklings decided to take advantage of the moment of weakness of the werewolves and the judges. Taking the flowers, Zika's friends urged him to take a flower too and finish the test, but he stood still. Even the penguin asked him to go, but the main character was confused, looking at Stella. Because Mrs. Stella lost her temper, the group of werewolves had to retreat from the battlefield. The main character decided to think about whether Mrs. Stella was really a witch, or whether the king was a false judge. But despite his mixed feelings, Zeke decided to pick a handful of flowers from the witch's garden. One greedy contender wanted to collect even more star fragments to sell later. But as soon as he touched the flowers again, he was struck by a strong electric shock and thrown back. It could only be done once, so Julius assigned this task to the suitors. Dean was very frightened by the sight of the werewolves and asked his friends to gather quickly so they could leave before the enemies returned. Dean's bird turned to the team and asked if they wanted to hurry up and move on to the next level. But Zeke firmly stated that he did not agree to such conditions, because the first priority was to find Freed. Bird believed that while they were undergoing the test, the young man would be able to find himself. Zeke became angry and was about to argue with the bird, but the girl was able to calm them both down. To understand their friend's urgency, the guys wanted to know the reason behind his motives. Dean revealed that he was looking for his father, because initially they lived together in the Deadlands. Dean and his father traveled through dangerous places and lived relying on each other. But one night, the child woke up to find that his father had left without saying anything. Dean didn't think he had abandoned him and hoped that his father had simply ascended to heaven and was waiting for him. He didn't want to rush. Dean was just worried and hurried in the heat of the moment. The girl was also in a terrible situation, as her younger siblings, who were the same age as Dean, were still in the Deadlands. They barely made ends meet, living in poverty and often going hungry, but they stuck together. One day, a firebird appeared before the girl and revealed how long it had been searching for her. She needed to hurry up and help her younger siblings so that they could overcome everything. The last word Zik heard from his dying father was run. The boy always followed this advice and ran away from life. He ran away from everything, ignoring all rules and laws. He ran away from the world that took everything from Zik. For him, a man who was simply kind without any reward, a reason without a cause to find out the truth. Putting their problems aside for the moment, the boys decided to eat something and find Frida. Stella was taken to the werewolf settlement, and they tried to cure her with the help of their tribe's shamans. Tanukin was furious. They were stealing the judge's power, gradually exterminating the werewolves, and defiling the family's honor. The other werewolves tried to calm him down, as it was necessary to remain calm. The power that was sealed inside the labor castle was gradually leaving Lady Stella. If the contenders continued to collect more stars, only a shell of Stella would remain. The shaman used all his strength to begin stabilizing Stella's condition, but they had to leave to stop the contenders. The group was about to find Frida and complete the trial when suddenly a werewolf jumped out at the group of contenders. Tiuna begged the people to return the star fragments, as they were part of Judge Stella's soul. The contenders refused to believe it so easily, deciding that they would first check with King Julius. Tiuna stood her ground, and the contenders could no longer hold back, several of them drawing their swords. The werewolf drew the bowstring, but remembered Stella's words that they could get hurt and hesitated. Hesitating before shooting, Tiuna had to take a blow from a challenger who stood confidently at his mark. Even though she was wounded, the werewolf spread her arms and asked for the star fragments to be returned. But the nasty challengers had no intention of backing down. They did not consider themselves villains, but at the same time they attacked the defenseless werewolf. Zik couldn't let them hurt Tayun, so he lunged forward and knocked the greedy men down with his wild fist. The main character asked the werewolf to accompany him to the werewolf settlement, because he had to see Lady Stella. Tanukin revealed to the other werewolves that they had not touched the pretenders, which had led to the current situation. Deputy Chief Tannen stated that Lady Stella's recovery was now a priority. No matter what, it was the most important thing. Tanan continued to explain to Tanukin about his reckless actions, turning it into a scene. Stella finally came to her senses. Her voice was unsteady, but she managed to ask the werewolves to stop arguing. The girl admitted that it was her fault. It all happened because of Stella's choice to ask them not to hate humans so much. Tanukin considered Stella to be generous, because all the blame actually lay with human desires, especially those of Denzel and Julius's son. Once, Chicken took the life of a werewolf, believing the war between humans and witches to be a misunderstanding. But no one listened to him. Tanukin believed that there was no point in caring about humans anymore, because Ashukana, who had followed them, was no longer there. The werewolves gathered at the entrance to the village, as they heard that the contenders had arrived. Zik wanted to meet Stella, but an enraged Tanukin rushed to attack the boy. Tanukin almost hurt the main character, but a sudden flash of light made him jump aside. Stella gathered her strength to get up and told the werewolf that he was her guest, and that Tanukin should behave appropriately. The girl asked Zik why they had come, assuming that they were working with the others to steal her power. According to rumors, witches are creatures that are unnatural to our world. Coming from the world of shadows, they drew power from reality and posed a great threat. It is said that the reason for the fall of the heavens is connected with the strengthening of the shadow world. However, the very existence of witches was shrouded in mystery. Although these creatures posed a great danger, Zika did not care about Stella's origins. The girl thanked Ziku for helping her before, but she understood that associating with her was dangerous for others. Dean himself was frightened, suggesting that Ziku return to the Kingdom of Labor and pretend that they knew nothing. Tanukin considered humans to be cowardly, so he never trusted this race of creatures. Zik revealed that he did not trust Stella, because those in power cannot be trusted. But she was the first person who helped him for no reason. So now, as a token of gratitude, the main character wanted to repay the girl. Stella's first request for being lifted up to the heavens was to take her to the real Star Garden in Labor Castle. Tanukin did not understand how his mistress could trust these people and tell them hidden secrets. Stella replied that there was nothing to fear in such a situation. The girl understood the werewolf's excitement, but once again, they had to move somewhere else. Now the werewolf was afraid to follow Stella, because if these suitors refused to believe him, he would no longer be able to serve the girl. Zeke revealed to Stella that the real Star Garden was located in the royal palace. The girl asked him to wait, as she still did not believe that Stella was a real judge, and asked her to prove it. Stella was now weak, having been forcibly stripped of her power as a judge. She still had power, but it was very unstable, according to Tanukin. The werewolves needed the help of the contenders, but the people of the kingdom were now persecuting them, and this had become impossible. But then they would not be able to do anything because of the restrictions associated with the trial, so it could be equated with a death march. Penguin noted that the real judge in the trial should be appropriate in terms of difficulty. Stella asked the kids to give her the pieces of the stars. Tanukin was shocked because his mistress was going to take another risk. The girl asked Stella why she didn't give the test to other people if she was capable of doing so. In fact, the trials were not suitable because Stella's condition had deteriorated, and several years ago, the candidates who had helped her had betrayed her. Tanukin interrupted Tiuna's story and asked the kids if they were ready to risk their lives for the sake of the unknown. The most important question for him was whether the guys would help the werewolves after passing the test. If that was true, Zik believed that they would be able to gather their strength and move on to the next level. Holding out the star fragments, the main character said he would trust and help Ms. Stella. Whether they wanted to or not, the rest of Zeke's team handed their star fragments to Stella. The guys didn't know what would happen, but they decided to trust the girl anyway so she could show the judge her power. Taking the star fragments, Stella released a pillar of bright power, covering the darkness with light. So much power was too much for the guys, and they could hardly resist such impulses. Suddenly, Zeke found himself in a flashback, where he was a little boy again, hiding from the killer who had taken his father's life. With blood on his blade, the man tried to find Zeke, who he believed had escaped. Taking his father's last gift, Zeke fell to his knees and burst into tears again, staring at the golden seed. He had been starving for a very long time. Zeke had no money for food, so he could only look at the food in front of him. Left with no options, the child had to steal a piece of bread in order to survive. But the seller easily caught up with the helpless boy, and he didn't care that he was very hungry. The man beat Zika and took what he had stolen. He lay on the ground and thought about the meaning of life, wondering if it would be better to just disappear. But even so, the main character was very afraid to die. Someone else was also being beaten nearby, which the boy immediately noticed. Zik couldn't help but notice that all around him people were being robbed, beaten, and broken. And if the whole world followed this rule, then the guy would also follow the callous way of life, destroying everything before his eyes. If everyone was doing evil, then Zeke would also rob and beat people up. If the whole world was rotten before his eyes, Zeke looked at himself from afar. His image was terrible, because then he tried with all his might and followed cruelty. No one ever reached out to help Zeke. But his greedy side stretched out its hand, offering to burn the whole world together. The main character even agreed with this, because rising into the sky, he forgot for a moment that he had lost his father and suffered all his life. Penguin and Fried stopped Zeke, saying that they had managed to rise to the sky together. The greedy side dispelled Fried, saying that it was just an illusion and that Zeke should remember his anger. But Zeke already understood everything. He was weak, cowardly, and low. But from that moment on, the guy was going to move up. The main character no longer wanted to give up, despite his weakness, and it would be that way until he took over the heavens. Greed attacked him, repeating that Zeke should accept his true nature, but he held on. Penguin said that Zeke was able to rise up with the burden and had already proven to everyone that he was not a weakling. Raising his hand along with his pet, Zeke managed to create a bright hand, fighting off the darkness. Grabbing the black greed with this power, it began to dry up, showing Zeke only joy before him. A group of witch hunters gathered at the entrance to the Kingdom of Labor, and Denzel was their leader. The contenders looked strangely at Fried, because he had only just joined the hunt and was the favorite of King Julius. The boy had to return his family heirloom, but he didn't understand why they showed him what they were hiding. Denzel headed inside, and after about 50 steps, he noticed some other movement. Fried followed Denzel, because by following him, he could find a clue before the hunt began. While the power restriction was in effect, Fried could not forcibly take possession of his family's artifact. Wandering through the corridors of the kingdom, the guy noticed a crack in the wall, inside which were fragments of stars and a girl in a cage. Fried's curiosity got the better of him, and he broke through the wall and entered the room, looking down at the girl from above. Questions filled his head because the mysterious girl exuded a strange energy. Denzel noticed Frida's actions and realized that he had committed unauthorized entry into the sanctuary. This puzzled the priest, because by breaking the laws, the family of Absolutes had discredited her reputation. Although Fried was a member of the Absolute family, he had to follow the laws of the Kingdom of Labor. The young man understood the situation he was in, because due to the restrictions, he had no chance of winning. To resolve this misunderstanding, Frid had to surrender, and he was arrested right in front of King Julius. Julius was disappointed, and Frid had to somehow make amends by saying that it was a misunderstanding. The most compelling argument was the destruction of the wall, but according to Frid, it collapsed on its own. The pressure from Denzel and Julius was intense, and the young man even agreed to accept punishment for his actions. Denzel decided to take advantage of this opportunity and asked the guards to bring a ritual chair. The man revealed to Frid that only a member of the Absolute family could use the artifact. The Soul Punisher is a sword that cuts through souls, which they use to split the judge's soul. Judges are lazy and egocentric. Regardless of whether the world is destroyed or not, their own safety always comes first. Denzel admitted that he personally divided the witch's soul to escape from the real judge. It was difficult because she was very powerful. If Stella had shown her true power, she would have destroyed the entire kingdom. The judge isolated himself, and self-destruction with his own hands forced him to divide his soul, which is a difficult process. But the other half of the soul escaped. It is necessary to use the Soul Punisher again to bring it back. Frid was shocked. Before him were people who had decided to break the balance created by God. Denzel considered his cause to be righteous, for they were trying to transfer power to a new judge, and for that they needed the help of a member of the family of the Absolute. Julius suggested that Frid simply give up his body so that they could use the Soul Punisher artifact. The artifact of the Absolutes. The family feared from generation to generation that it would inevitably be used for evil. Denzel showed the scar on his arm. The strong are dangerous, so the man deliberately made them weak. There was no other way to use the Soul Punisher, but now the supply was exhausted, and Denzel needed materials again. He realized the extent of Frid's power, which had not been visible before. This time, he had to use his body wisely. Frid was not going to give up his body without a fight. Thanks to his power, which was stronger than they expected, the guy broke the chair. Denzel was surprised. He had seen his abilities before, and could not have foreseen such great strength. Frid understood that he could not defeat Denzel and Julia, so he decided to retreat to safety. He couldn't use his full power now, but Frid had enough experience to hide it. Until now, they had fought countless battles, and now a witch had appeared before them who had destroyed the second level. Victory in this struggle would restore peace to the floor, and they would restore the sky, returning abundance to the country and the kingdom of labor. The werewolf settlement was already on high alert, and everyone noticed and shared with the others that Chicken had begun his attack. The army of guards, Chicken, and the pretenders marched on the werewolf settlement, which also gathered its forces. Tanukin considered Chicken's methods immoral, for he had deceived so many people and involved them in an unnecessary war. Stella stepped forward with her speech, saying that they had previously coexisted in harmony. The sky collapsed, and they fell here in order to unite and survive. Because of the enormous power that Stella possessed, and the incident in which thousands of people died, Stella understood why she was called a witch. She even lost her memory after that. But there was no reason for strife. The girl is here to pay for that incident, but she did nothing wrong. She was falsely accused, and then a bloody war with the werewolves was unleashed. Chicken slandered Stella, claiming that she was lying and gathering strength to take over the kingdom of labor. Tanukin asked to see the contenders, but all they cared about were jewels and fruit. They just wanted to move up to the next level. They had already taken Stella's soul and set their goal, reaching the werewolves' settlement. Tanukin could no longer follow peaceful ways and decided to do things his own way, forcing his enemies to pay for the lives of their comrades. Mrs. Stella's words seemed to vanish, and the werewolves rose up in battle against the guards. Chicken said that Tanukin was stronger than the former chief of the tribe named Ashukan, who wanted peace but was brutally killed. Chicken's vile words continued to pour out. He was running wild, as if he wanted to relive the feeling of killing Ashukan. Frid was still in the kingdom. The witch hunt had already begun, so there were few soldiers left inside. Although it was necessary to act with caution, it was the best time to bring back the Soul Avenger. Ruins noticed Frid's spectacular exit, because he thought he would become a guinea pig, and the journey would end there. Ruins couldn't leave due to restrictions, but he could clearly feel the energy of the Soul Punisher within the kingdom's walls. His blood relatives could also feel it, and by following the bird, Frid would surely be able to find the artifact. The bird had no strength left and disappeared, so Frid decided to listen to his words and try to sense the artifact. His words proved to be true, and concentrating, the boy found the sealed artifact. Frid immediately rushed to the Soul Punisher, skillfully bypassing the guards, getting closer and closer to his goal. But Julius was in the room with his grandchildren, waiting for Frid to come for the artifact. Suddenly, the granddaughter fell, Her arm fell off, and looking at her, one could see that she was a doll. The old man claimed that the witch Stella had abandoned him and his entire family, as well as everyone who was loyal to her. Julius' family gave her everything. However, she was only concerned with her own problems. Stella said that her sins were the only ones, the saddest and most painful. In the end, his family was reduced to a handful of ashes. Stella turned away, even though she could have saved everyone. Yuli condemned Frida because her body was wounded just like his. Therefore, the king wanted to become a true judge. Yulia launched her attack, her hand reaching for Frida to take her body for her own purposes. While everyone was fighting, Stella looked into the distance, hoping that Zik would land at his destination. After unleashing the judge's ability, she exhausted her strength and nearly killed Zek's group. If even one contender had been on the side of the werewolves and fought, they would not have been on the verge of death. When Stella was helpless and did nothing, the werewolves believed only in her and did everything in their power. Stella dreamed of peace and harmony, but Tanakan asked her to look at reality. Following the judge's words, they only lost their loved ones. Stella wanted to fight, but Tanukin was against it, because the judges had neither memories nor strength. If their power returned, the girl also wanted to participate in the battle, but the contenders would not be able to return after the trial. Stella did not agree with this. A single star rose in the cloudy sky, and she believed that they would definitely return. Regardless of whether they did so or not, the war still belonged to the werewolves. Stella did not want war, as the werewolves would simply go to their deaths, but Tiuna stopped her. At that moment, Zeke finally came to his senses and asked Tanukin to trust the judge's words. Stella immediately hugged the main character, tears in her eyes, happy that the contestants had succeeded in everything. The judge wanted to know how the test went, and the guys replied that the test was very difficult, but they no longer doubted the judge. Dean had almost given up hope of returning. He was in a moment that he missed very much. Zeke was surprised, because he had terrible memories, while the girl had no moments or memories at all. Stella thanked the guys for returning and said that the trial had immersed everyone in the necessary moments. Zek's strength was finally restored, and he was ready to defeat all upcoming enemies. Tanukin said that these three would not be able to influence the situation in any way, so they could just go higher. Tanukin did not want help from humans, but Zeke insisted that he put aside his distrust and listen to his plan. At present, Zeke and his team continued to fly forward while the girl supported him. Dean crashed into the guys because his strength had not yet fully returned after the trial and could fail. While Fried was preparing to fight King Julius, Zeke and the others broke through the roof and joined the battle. As soon as the guys got up, they noticed the terrifying face of King Julius, which had changed dramatically. The king immediately continued his attack, but the guys easily dodged it, not understanding what was in front of them. The girl didn't care who it was, because when you're attacked, you have to attack back. The intensified flames had virtually no effect on Julius. He redirected the power of the attack into his hand and launched a counterattack. Fried stood in front of Robbie and protected her with his flaming sword from the king's attack. But the boy's strength was not enough. He managed to protect Robbie, but his sword began to disappear. Zeke became angry and challenged the king, who immediately responded with a star comet attack. The main character put up his gloves and managed to stop the attack, but immediately realized that his enemy was very dangerous. Fried suggested leaving, but Zeke declared that the power of the judge was locked here, which they must find and take. Yuli said that he was the only true judge, and his current appearance was a curse. A punishment for those who opposed the will of heaven. Julius's entire family fell because Stella was a witch, and he had suffered from that moment on. The king wanted to put everything in its place, even under the effect of the curse of heaven. In order to use the divine artifact of the Soul Punisher, Julius had to obtain the body of the Absolute. Fried wanted to continue fighting, but his friends understood that he did not have the strength. Zik asked them to let others take over. Zik asked Julius not to underestimate him, as he had managed to overthrow a first-level judge. Robbie noticed that despite the king's size, he was too fast, but if she had time, she could knock him out. Zik realized that his task was to grab the king and immobilize him until the girl delivered the decisive blow. Yuli summoned dozens of star fragments, creating a meteor shower on the guy who rushed straight at the enemy. One wing was not enough to dodge the barrage of attacks, but he had to close the distance no matter what. Zik broke through the attacks, but the king managed to create a star shield and protect himself. While the main character was under the shield's effect, Julius directed a star beam at Robbie, who was gathering her strength. Zik broke free from the shield and exposed himself to the beam, declaring to the king that he was his opponent. Zik tried to find out how much longer he had to hold on. Robbie tried her best, asking him to be patient. It was impossible to approach the king with unstable wings. He shot stars when Zik was far away, and when he approached, he was struck by the shield. The main character remembered that he had been fast in the past, back when he didn't have wings. While everyone was fighting, Dean applied his medicine to Frida, but it needed time to take effect. Not expecting disaster, the guys were stunned when Denzel appeared behind them with a sword in his hands. Frid had a little strength left, which he used to reduce the damage from the sword strike. The guy realized that he could lure him here and take possession of his body, then suddenly attack and take the hand of the Absolute. Denzel had been hunting for the body of the Absolute for a long time, and now he was not going to lose to some pretenders. Suddenly the power of the sword awakened, and Fried fell powerlessly to the ground from the pressure of the aura. Behind Denzel was Dean, who had released his wings. He didn't know how it happened because no one had ever passed the test, but Dean completed the trial of a true judge, so he was able to catch Denzel off guard with his power. When the smoke cleared, Denzel was still standing. Dean's attack had done almost no damage to the cleric. The man wanted to strike Dean with the Soul Punisher, but suddenly he stood still and Denzel couldn't lower his blade. Fried raised his hand of absolute power and ordered the Soul Punisher, as if he were a blood relative, to recognize Fried as his master. As soon as he said this, the sword struck Denzel's hands with lightning and fell from his hands, leaving deep burns. Denzel was stunned, for he had never encountered such phrases in ancient sources on the transfer of sword ownership. The family of the Absolute had always prepared for the worst, and finally Denzel's atrocities came to an end. Thanks to the sword, Fried gained new powers. Rising, he summoned magic balls behind him. Denzel rushed into the attack, but was immediately stopped when a rain of swords appeared above his head. Denzel's attack was unsuccessful. He was pierced by dozens of swords and fell to his knees before Friede. At this time, Zik broke through King Julius's attacks thanks to his nimble feet. But as soon as he got close, the main character realized that he was too late, because the speed of the shield's creation was not small. Jumping back, Julius took advantage of this moment to gather another burst of power. Robbie's hammer exceeded its size tenfold. She raised her weapon and strengthened it with her fury. Zeke turned to his pet and asked him if he could use the same technique he had used to defeat the first-level judge. But the penguin did not give a self-serving answer, saying only that Zik had used this technique and that it was up to him. Rabbi finished accumulating power, and now all that remained for Zik was to break through Yulia's attack. This time the king's attack was stronger than before, and a huge flaming sphere headed towards them. Zik remembered how he struggled to survive in the dark world. He raised his hand in determination and concentrated. Suddenly, the small human hand was covered in darkness and created huge dragon claws. Zik put his hand forward in defense, but he quickly realized that the technique was not yet perfect. Despite the imperfection of his new skill, the main character was able to deflect the star comet. As soon as the comet shattered, dozens of small fragments began to fall like a meteor shower. Zik could only fend them off with a flurry of blows. While he was fending off attacks from the air, Julius attacked him personally, but Zik's nimble feet allowed him to dodge. The king was too focused on killing Zik, not noticing that Robbie was standing behind him. Striking the ground with her hammer, the girl unleashed a maximum explosion of flame, covering the king in tongues of fire. The king was thrown back, and his fall broke the wall behind which the cage with the other part of Stella's soul was hidden. The guys entered the room, but Julius, covered in wounds and blood, rose again to fight. He grew horns and turned completely into a monster. Julius was too dark to make this power his own. Almost everyone had exhausted their strength, but Denzel was still alive and did not want it to end like this. Denzel's burst of power engulfed the king's body, turning Julius, who had completely become a monster, into a puppet. The man declared that he would not surrender to such weak contenders, for he must reclaim the place he lost 100 years ago. Bone wings appeared behind his back, and the man's zeal was unstoppable, but the guys did not understand what judge he was talking about. 100 years ago, Denzel turned to the god of the heavens, Neod, apologizing to him, because he had to atone for his sin. A man stepped out of the shadows and addressed Denzel, the timid destroyer of the heavens. Noticing this man, Denzel began to yell at him, saying that he had deceived him and made him betray God with his ambitions. The man used his power and made a hole in the top, surprising Denzel with the fact that he had powers after all. He absorbed Denzel's powers and said that he did not need Denzel's abilities to carry out his plan. After that, he fell into the ground, begging God to save him from this horror. Denzel directed his power into the second part of Stella's soul, and she suddenly awoke. The man was shocked by this reaction, but there was nothing he could do. She had to be part of Denzel's plan. Suddenly, Stella waved her hand, and Denzel's wings shattered into small pieces of bone. Denzel took control of Julia's body and was about to attack Stella, who was getting in his way. Zeke realized that he urgently needed to protect Stella because there was no time to figure out the situation. Waving his hand, the main character was sure that he would be able to use his new ability again. This time, the ultrasound was even more powerful, completely enveloping King Julius's body. This time, the king fell for good. Denzel tried to get up. He didn't want it to end like this. The guys began to rejoice for each other. Zeke boasted of his strength, and Robbie wanted to know about Freed's new sword. The king's body shrank, and he returned to his human form, which looked disgusting. The king told Stella that she had abandoned those who were loyal to her. If he had any sins, they were only those committed for the sake of the lady. Stella understood that her ignorance had caused him suffering that could not be forgotten, and the past could not be undone. An apology was all she could offer. With the arrival of Zika's group, her mind was awakened, and for that she would fulfill her duties. On the battlefield, Stella watched the horrific spectacle of werewolves and guardsmen killing each other, but she could not stop the war on her own. While Stella wanted to help the werewolf, Chicken found her, and swinging his spear, was about to finish her off. The girl did not understand what death was. Her memories began with death. Everything was forgotten, but only Stella could understand this. A judge is someone who hears God's call and takes on sins. Even if she ultimately receives redemption, she will not be able to spare them. Tanukin exposed himself to attack and was dying, but when he saw the attempt on his mistress's life, the werewolf rose. Holding the spear in his body, Tanukin raised his hand and used his cutting skill. Chicken was wounded by this attack, and while his hands were occupied, he struck with his head as if it were an iron tip. They used to coexist with humans, but misunderstanding and lies ruined their relationship. Ashukan believed that they could understand each other. Tanukin fell dead. They did not achieve the peace that Lady Stella had spoken of, and the werewolves would come to an end. Chicken was happy that he would finally achieve his goal of becoming the man who punished the judge and became famous. Stella wept over Tanukin's body. Chicken struck, but the light shell protected her from death. Chicken jumped back, and the second part of Mrs. Stella's soul appeared before him. The captain immediately realized that the royal palace had fallen, but even so, he wanted to achieve his goal. Spreading his wings, Chicken gathered all his power into an iron spear to proclaim himself God's executioner. Chicken pierced the second part of Stella's soul, but nothing happened. She was just a pile of energy and could not die. Stella's soul scattered into pieces, and all the magic began to be absorbed into the real girl. Stella had waited a long time for this. The black star fell, and she met him again. Zeke went against the fate of the heavenly world. The one who provided the opportunity to atone for sins, the image of the judge returned to its former appearance. Stella returned to her title of second-level decision-maker. Chicken did not believe that this would change the situation in any way and struck again, but it was all in vain. No blows could even come close to piercing Stella's shield, and with each strike, Chicken was thrown back. The girl raised her hand, creating a swirling light above it that was full of various stars. And suddenly, the darkness that had shone over the sky for more than 10 years dissipated in an instant, revealing the stars to the world. The reason he ascended to the sky was because he wanted to live in a peaceful world. His father, sister, and he wanted to make his family happy. He just wanted peace with people, as it had been before. The werewolf did not want to take everything by force. Zika's group noticed that they had successfully brought peace to the second level, rejoicing in their success. Stella folded her hands together, asking the God of Heaven, as a sinner who had made many mistakes, to forgive them all. God heard Lady Stella's plea, and small stars fell upon the people, healing their wounds. The knights and werewolves reflected on their recent battle tactics, realizing that they had been pointless. Chicken ordered the knights to quickly get rid of the witch who was harming the second level. But his words had no effect. The knights realized their guilt and threw their weapons to the ground. The knight took Commander Chicken and said that it was all over. The sky that everyone wanted so badly to return had been restored. But the captain did not want to believe it, because everything was back in its place, and his ambitions and goals had been destroyed. Ziku's wings had fully returned, which was a sign that everything was over, and the second level had come to peace. The guys noticed a group of troops and werewolves and decided to hurry there to find out what was going on. Lady Stella said that in the distant past, she had fallen to the second level as a heavenly sinner, and she could not forget that day. The judge only thought about her pain, ignoring the love of the werewolves and the people who supported her. Stella pushed their suffering into the background, paying no attention to all the problems. One day, a man appeared who wanted to take what belonged to her and deceived everyone. He tried to take over the world with lies. Suddenly, she thought that if her life ended, Stella would not have to carry this burden, and she deliberately gave up on herself. Even as a judge, she became a sinner. Therefore, Stella wanted to atone for her guilt before everyone. Suddenly, Lady Stella fell to the ground. One of the knights said that because of her healing ability, the judge had to sacrifice herself. Stella was losing strength, but she thanked Zika for helping her return to her image for a moment. The main character began to cry. They had just become friends, and he couldn't forget her kindness, but she was already leaving him. Suddenly, the judge's body began to glow, starlight enveloped her, and something appeared on Stella's head. In an instant, the girl rose again, the light faded, and a small bird appeared on her head. Zeke nervously stated that he had already thought about Stella's death. Her opinion was the same, but she was alive. If the lady had not yet been released, she would have a lot to atone for in her role as a judge. With her power, Stella opened a spatial passage above the heads of the contenders. The girl joyfully declared that she still had to play her role, and again asked for the trust of the residents of the second level. At that moment, the man who betrayed Denzel stood by the divine relic and activated it. The artifact drew its power from light and darkness. According to the will of God's blood, all these heavens would be united into one. The guy noticed the heavenly gates. He wanted to rise at least to the 5th level and settle there in order to live a peaceful life. Suddenly, Denzel grabbed him and began to strangle him. He did not want to give up, and since he could not take away the judge's power, he wanted to ascend, even if it meant taking that right away from the contender. Stella was reborn, just like the contenders. Her soul was divided into 2 parts, and a soul bird appeared. Zeke didn't know this, but Robbie revealed that judges were not like them. Judges are close to the heavenly gods. They are more whole than the challengers. The main character became curious whether Stella would be able to ascend if she had a soul bird. The only option would be if she could worship God again and correct her mistakes, but that was impossible. The judge is a heavenly sinner, which is why they cannot cross the staircase. But the contenders were very different from them. If they passed the staircase test, they could cross as many levels as they wanted. But if they descended to the deep lands, the soul bird would disappear, and they would not be able to ascend again. Although this thought was frightening, Zeke was sure that they would only move upward on their way to heaven. Stella, the 2nd-level judge, declared that those who passed the test would be granted the right to move on to the next level of heaven. Suddenly, each contender received permission, and they were no longer limited in their power, spreading their wings. The group thanked each other for their good teamwork and decided to continue climbing together. Stella wished Ziku a safe journey, and in a split second, the group soared into the heavens on their way to adventure. Tanukin was also able to heal himself. As soon as the werewolf rose, Stella rushed into his strong embrace. With tears in her eyes, the girl told him that the werewolf had been protecting her all this time. But finally, peaceful times had come. Once they reached the pillar that led the contenders to the next level, everything seemed too calm. There were no storms or tornadoes here, but it wasn't that simple. Fried heard something approaching the group very quickly. It turned out to be a disaster from above, as pieces of ice fell on the guys. A huge chunk and many fragments flew down. Robbie grabbed Dean, as he couldn't hold himself up under the barrage of ice. This time, the guys understood that it would be difficult if they were scattered like last time. Zik didn't consider the ice a problem, as he simply wanted to break the pieces in his path with physical force. Fried didn't want to use the artifact to break the ice, but in the current situation, there was nothing else he could do. Suddenly, something huge hit Fried. The main character noticed this and wanted to check on his friend's condition. Looking closely, the guys noticed a huge snake guarding the passage to the next level. Zik felt great danger from this creature, even experiencing a fear so strong that he had never felt before in his life. The main character decided to attack first, unleashing the power of his gloves, but he only managed to stun the snake. Realizing that the blow had done no harm, the guys decided to rush up to the next level, but the huge monster easily caught up with the challengers, and at the edge of the next level was the snake's mouth. Zeke took the initiative again to prevent them from being devoured and created a pillar of darkness with his wild fist. But this time, the attack failed to stun the monster, and it continued to rush forward with its mouth open. Fried activated the power of the relic, blinding the snake with the light of memory. He told Zeke not to stand still, as it was more important to fly away. These attacks failed to injure the beast and only angered it even more, increasing its desire to devour the challengers. Grumpy told Ziku that he could fly even faster than he was now. The main character did not understand what he was talking about, but the penguin added that Ziku's strength was his strength, and by believing in his own strength, he would be able to spread his wings even wider. Having acquired the title of Dragon King, Ziko's wings spread even wider. To escape from the huge beast, Zik grabbed his friends and dragged them along at greater speed. Thanks to the wings of the Dragon King, Zik and his group were able to reach the next level, leaving the snake behind. The allies were even more surprised by where they found themselves. This level was many times stranger than all the previous ones. Fried was confused. This couldn't be true in his opinion. He learned that the third heavenly level was the world of dark swamps. The inhabitants of this level noticed the new arrivals, realizing that for those who had ascended from the second level, the trial here was tantamount to death. Zeke continued to spread optimism, indifferent to his surroundings, because they had to pass the test of this level. But suddenly something strange began to happen. Everything before their eyes began to move. It was difficult to see, but the world had turned upside down. Due to this unexpected turn of events, the guys began to fall down, because they had not yet adapted to this property. The guys ended up in a swamp called the Black River. The waters of this river were dense and caused the group to drown in them. The man watched them, calling them fools. The contenders rose too quickly into the sky and would now die, falling into the Black River. Zik couldn't believe that he would die so hopelessly. At that moment, the penguin mocked him, because he hadn't even managed to pass the test. The main character asked the penguin to lend him strength, and the penguin reminded him that his strength also belonged to Zik. The next moment, a huge dragon of darkness emerged from the Black River, shining with its purple eyes. Zik controlled this dragon, and at the same time pulled his team out of the Black River, spitting them out on the ground nearby. The man noticed all this and was shocked. He had waited a long time for this moment, and finally it had come to pass. Robbie woke up and tried to understand what had happened. All she remembered was how suddenly everything had gone dark, and then it was as if the sky was spinning. What they did not see seemed to be a limitation of the trials at this level. But Fried knew nothing about the Black River. Two people in white suits appeared in front of the group, addressed them, and asked where they had come from. Rom said he had just seen a huge black creature, a dark monster. But Fried didn't understand what they were talking about, because they had only just ascended from the second level. In the world of yin and yang, the balance was harmonious and hung by a thread. These were worlds of opposites, and thanks to the balance, their boundaries were not violated. And so it remained until the heavens collapsed and creatures from the dark world began to appear in the light. When Rom learned that the boys had personally escaped from the Black River, he was surprised, calling it a divine miracle. According to him, without the mercy of the heavenly god Neod, no one would have escaped from the Black River of death. The Heavenly Book, chapter 5, verse 12, said that the forgiveness of sinners is only the will of heaven. Since these guys were forgiven by heaven itself, they would become honored guests of this level. Rom immediately invited Zika and his friends to go with them. They had been chosen by God, having crossed the Black River on their own. This meant that they deserved to fly to heaven. Noticing Fried, Rom began to shout, as the Absolutes were the only blood family to receive God's mercy. Those who foolishly rejected God's voice. Vivio also hated the Absolutes, and he immediately took out a small hammer and nails, preparing to destroy him. The Absolutes interfered with their plans. God was just a symbol. They had their own ideals of serving him. The man continued to watch the boys, wanting to see Zika's power clearly with his own eyes once again. Robbie did not want to fight again, especially since their opponents were not like those they had fought before. The energy of these people was different. They seemed much stronger than all their previous opponents. Viveo struck the ground with his hammer and summoned roots with thorns, which immediately entangled Zika's group. Dean managed to dodge and fly into the sky, but Fried reminded him that if he flew up, he would fall back to the ground. Dean didn't have time to react, and his eyes spun again, causing him to lose his balance. Zeke noticed his falling friend and decided to save him. The main character used ultrasound to destroy the thorns so that Dean would not fall on them. The mysterious man continued to watch the battle, and every time he saw Zeke's abilities, a smile lit up his face. Rom also noticed Zeke's power, calling it an unholy force of the dark world, and now they would be punished. Rom closed his book and used a prayer. Barely visible hands squeezed Zeke from both sides. The boy fell to the ground and spat blood. He didn't even notice the attack, but he had already received so many wounds. Vivio continued the attack, using large thorns, sending a thorn that was like a drill. The rotation of this attack made it difficult to block, and its speed left no time to react. Fried was able to rush into the attack, directing the Soul Punisher at Viveo, but Rom used the image technique. Rom's ability summoned a heavenly fist that fell straight from the clouds and pinned Fried to the ground. The main character escaped from Rom's seal and counterattacked his enemies with a burst of darkness from his wild fist. But the man easily blocked this burst with his dome ability, covering himself and Viveo. The next ability was the death penalty. which unleashed a barrage of heavenly strikes on the group. Robbie understood that such an attack was too powerful, and they would not be able to block or dodge it. Suddenly, a sword the size of a statue crashed to the ground, cutting through the heavenly death penalty in its path. Roma was even more enraged that they dared to resist the heavenly punishment, which even the judges could not stop. The guys decided to use their techniques together to dispel Roma's heavenly hand, but it was completely useless. The attacks could not offer any resistance. At that moment, the same man rushed towards them. The man's speed was incredible. He swung his sword and instantly severed the heavenly hand. Vivio immediately sent roots at him, but they were also deftly cut by the mysterious man's sword. The enemy began to approach, and Ram realized the seriousness of the situation. Instead of attacking, he switched to defense with a dome. At that moment, Viveo attacked with various attacks, this time summoning spikes above the man's head. The man used his magic to create another blade and immediately threw it forward. As the blade flew towards the cultists, the man in the cloak swung his sword and tore all the spikes apart. The sword crashed into the dome and began to pierce it, leaving the cultists in complete shock at the enemy's attacks. As soon as the smoke cleared, the mysterious man was already in front of the cultists, frightening them even more. Vivio and Ram retreated, throwing thorns at him, but the man easily summoned another huge sword. The sword practically crashed down on the cultists, but at the last moment they managed to jump back from the attack. The blade immediately scattered, and instead, the man found himself even closer to his enemies. Swinging his weapon, the man struck with his sword between the cultists so as not to hit them, for they could no longer flee. His hood fell off, and he offered to end the fight there, leaving his enemies no choice. Ram and Viveo knew him. The man's name was Nephirim. Ram said that the judges wanted to punish him, saying only that someday he would regret his actions. The cultists had to flee. Turning to Zika's group, Nephirim's face changed. A smile appeared on it, and he was happy to meet them. The guys immediately began to thank him for his help, as they could have died in this battle. Nephirim hid his sword and decided to tell the newcomers more about this level. Originally, this was the 3rd level, but now the 3rd to 7th floors had merged into a space of chaos. Just a year ago, this floor was independent, but when the sky collapsed, it became part of the chaos. Roger, the judge of the 4th level, a fallen sinner, was in charge of all this. The sinner Roger had no intention of atoning for his guilt. On the contrary, he tried to challenge the heavenly god. In short, the levels were plunged into chaos, and the blame lay solely with one sinner who challenged the most powerful. Nephirim did not ask for help, but simply wanted to negotiate in gratitude for his assistance. But the guys left him, as Zeke refused the offer, forcing Robbie to wonder why he did it. The main character refused based on his experience. In fact, there were no favors without a reason. Nephirim offered them to fight Roger, and in return, he would make them stronger for fighting enemies together. Nephirim promised to maximize their abilities. The chaotic world is complex, as trials are intertwined and the leaders of each level are mixed. Zeke's weak group would not be able to survive in the harsh conditions of mixed levels of chaos. Zeke decided that they could return to him if they changed their minds. According to Nephirim, Freed's family was somewhere around here. But their journey could not be peaceful, as a huge minion of chaos burst out of the ground, making the group regret not going with Nephirim. Zeke suggested that the guys not waste time on this snake, but try to quietly get around it. But they were too noisy and easily attracted the attention of the hungry monster. A couple of guys in white cloaks appeared, immediately flew to the monster, and prepared to strike it down. One of them created a water blast that exploded on the snake's neck, throwing the huge beast back. The second man possessed the abilities of stone. He stood directly in front of the beast and created a stone wall. The water elementalist began to attack the entire body, leaving deep wounds on the snake. The monster could no longer withstand these attacks and lost consciousness, falling to the ground. The snake's entire body was covered with cuts from a couple of attacks. The main character was surprised that such a powerful monster had surrendered so helplessly after only 2 attacks. Fried thanked them for saving him, but the group immediately noticed a group of people who were bound in chains. The people in chains approached the beast and began to cut its skin with small knives. Zik was unhappy with this sight, so he turned to the 2 leaders and asked them why they were treating these people like slaves. The guy took off his hood and asked Zeke's group who they were, because this was their territory. Fried looked closely at the clothing of these people, which was identical to that of the cultists who had attacked them. Realizing that they might attack them again, Fried said that they were just passing by and didn't want any trouble. Zika didn't like the attitude of these people, and he wondered again why they treated their own people like slaves. The guy replied that these people were sinners who had broken the rules. They had interfered with their work and had simply been punished. And if Zika's group was also going to interfere, they would be considered sinners. Robbie also didn't like that they had become slaves. But if they got involved in the battle, everyone would die. They say that the higher you climb, the happier the world that opens up to you, but that's not true. Penguin added that now is not the time, because they are only moving upward, because all they need to do is reach their goal. Robbie wanted the sky to collapse because of the absurdity of the world, but now she was indulging in it. Rabbi the Bird told her not to worry, because even if the levels are united, it is obvious that this is not the perfect world they are looking for. Fried suggested that they first find his family and talk about it with the absolutes. His family had been trying to maintain balance for a long time. The guys noticed that Zika was not with them, and looking back, they realized that he was already at the snake's corpse. The main character had already attacked the slave leaders, declaring that humans are not animals. Zeke added that even if you have power, you can't do whatever you want. Zika shouted at the slaves not to stand there and to fight against the cruel fate that had befallen them. If they united, they could get out of there. But there was only hopelessness in the slaves' eyes, and they continued to work. Anyone here could have thrown off their shackles, but they believed that there was no way out of this world anyway. The other leaders noticed how Zik began to interfere and beat their comrades, angering them. Heaven. This place is everyone's dream. To reach this dream, many people have given up their lives,